Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission. My name is Scott Peters and I chair the commission. Carol Goddard is sitting on my left, and she is a new member of the commission who is beginning her service this evening, and we welcome you. We have 5 members here, which is a quorum and of the commission, and several associate members here as well. The way we proceed with hearings is the staff will make a report to the commission. After the staff report is finished, the applicant will make its presentation. Following the applicant's presentation, the members of the commission will, if they have any questions, they will ask questions. And then members of the public are invited to ask questions. And that question period is not a period for comments, but literally questions. Following all of the questions, the members of the public and anyone else who wishes to speak can make comments and tell the commission things that are relevant to the decision that the commission must make. The commission is not final authority, but we'll make a recommendation to the City Council. The Council will get a report of the what was stated here at the Commission, a recommendation from the Commission members, and then the Council will consider what to do and make its own decision. We're a fact-finding body, and we're required to make our decision based on standards and make some findings of fact with respect to the standards contained in the ordinances. So that's how we'll proceed. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion or corrections?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ford.
A couple of little nits on the minutes. I was curious as to why Scott Bernstein got credit as an other present, but none of the applicant's people nor the public who spoke. Seems to me either you list them all or you don't list any.
That's, I think, a reasonable
On page
comment.
2, if I remember correctly, the architect's name was Copper, not Cooper.
That's correct.
And then, when the roll call is reported, there's sort of an awkward construction here. Commissioners Asaro, Commissioner Shore, Commissioner Dubin, Commissioner Lewis, and Chairman Peters voted aye. I think what you mean is Commissioners Asaro, Shore, Dubin, and Lewis. And you might as well spell nay correctly. That's all.
Is there any? Are there any other corrections or nits?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, these are very comprehensive minutes. It's 11 pages, single space. I seldom see minutes this well drafted, and I know it took a lot of time, a tremendous amount of time, and your time, Mr. Latinovich, is valuable. And given the fact that we do have video, perhaps going forward we should consider summary minutes as opposed to what we have in front of us. It's just a suggestion.
An anti-nit, perhaps.
An anti-nit.
Any other corrections or comments?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I would register myself on the other side and say, oh, sorry. And say that I do like the detailed minutes. I realize that it takes the staff some time, but I think it's worth having a record not only of what happened, but of how that discussion went.
But is not a video sufficient?
Is it likely that members of the council more likely to watch the video or read the minutes?
I'll just comment that for the last plan development application, for whatever it's worth anecdotally, one of the property owners who testified approached me at the Starbucks after between the first and second hearing, and came up to me and asked me if I was Mr. Asaro. I said, no, my name's Lenny. Mr. Asaro is my dad. And she said, I saw the prior hearing on the internet. So I've talked to other people who do, if they are interested, are more inclined to review it on the internet than they are to read the minutes. But that's just
I'm going to suggest
Anecdote.
that we postpone the discussion of types of minutes since we have a lot of people here for a hearing, but that we approve or disapprove the minutes and then come back to the discussion after the hearing if anyone is still awake. Is there a motion? There is a motion to approve the minutes with corrections that have been made by Mr. Ford, and Mr. Ford has seconded. All those in favor? Aye. I vote aye. The minutes are approved, and we'll now recognize the staff for their report on the proposal and application for 1515 Chicago Avenue Plan Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will first read the case into record. Tom Blanc of Janko Group, LLC, Quadrangle, LLC, developer of the proposed project, has applied for a special use for a planned development in the D4 Downtown Transition District, zoning code 6, section 611, to construct an 8-story, 85-foot-tall extended stay hotel. The proposed hotel would include 114 rooms and 35 open parking spaces. The applicant seeks site development allowances for the parking setback for the open parking lot in the rear of the property. In addition, the applicant may seek, and the Plan Commission may consider, additional site development allowances as may be necessary or desirable for development of the proposed hotel. The Plan Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the final determining body for this project. So here's the zoning map of the subject property in the surrounding area. The property is zoned D3 or D4 Downtown Transition District. The properties to the north, south, and to the west are also zoned D4 Downtown Transition. And then the properties to the east are zoned R6 General Residential, which is primarily multifamily. The surrounding uses to the north include a 2-story commercial building, a number of retail tenants, one of which is a Giordano's restaurant directly to the north. The 2-story building across Chicago Avenue is occupied by AT&T. And then to the south is the historical landmark mixed-use building, the Chaumont, with retail spaces on the ground level and apartments on the upper levels. To the east of the subject property are 8-story multifamily residential buildings. Here's the rendering of the proposed project looking southeast on the site from the intersection of Davis and Chicago. Because the project includes over 20,000 square feet in area, the petitioner is requesting a plan development approval for the 8-story building. This would be an extended stay hotel, but the Hyatt House is a flag. Here's the ground floor for the proposed project. The ground floor of the building is oriented along the street. The areas that are shaded are devoted to staff of the hotel, and then the areas in white are open to public and guests of the hotel. The parking lot is located in the rear of the property with access from the alleys on the north side and then the 20-foot alley on the east. In addition, 7 parking spaces are accessed directly from the alleys. The petitioner will be removing 2 on-street parking spaces to accommodate the loading area for guests. Upon entrance, the front desk is in the center of the site. There's some lounge and seating areas to the south of there. And then the southern portion of the ground floor is devoted to conference room and just meeting space. The northern portion of the ground floor is devoted to a dining room area and bar for the hotel guests primarily. I'll just mention that one of the conditions in the staff report is that this space be converted to a normal sort of restaurant bar that caters to the public as much as any other restaurant. Staff strongly believes that this is a positive attribute for the hotel, for this area. There are commercial uses on the north of the hotel, and then to the south in the Schumann building, and without any sort of retail public space, there would be a gap in that commercial corridor along the Chicago Avenue. So that's one of the conditions in the report. The petitioner will also redo the streetscape elements on Chicago Avenue. They would be removing 2 existing trees along Chicago Avenue and replanting those, or planting 3 new trees that are upsized to a 6-inch caliper trees. Here's the second floor of the building. The areas in yellow are the hotel rooms. Those are positioned sort of in east-west direction. The southern portion of the second floor is devoted to an indoor swimming pool and then fitness and exercise area. The northern portion of the second floor is an open landscape terrace for the guests of the hotel. And then here are the rest of the floors, the typical floor plan basically devoted to hotel rooms. There's a total of 114 rooms per code. That requires a total of 34 parking spaces on site. The petitioner is proposing 34 parking spaces, so they meet the requirement. There's an additional 1 compact stall in the northeast corner of the site, right here, that was converted to a compact stall to allow for the trucks that are loading and unloading to exit the site and make northbound movements. That's one of the other conditions in the staff report. We're recommending that the petitioner install a traffic sign at the end of the alley that would direct trucks northbound and prohibit any trucks from making right turn movements. Right turn movements would be allowed for any normal vehicles and regular cars. Here's just the front elevation and the rear elevation of the building. I will point out that the proposed elevation, the materials, the look of the building is a result of 2 neighborhood meetings and additional meetings with area architects that the developer held, and then numerous conversations with staff. The petitioner is proposing the exterior materials to be primarily reddish brick, and then some metal accents primarily on the north and west corner of the building that would define the sort of the tower of the building. And then this is the rear elevation. The petitioner has added some details and windows to the rear elevation to improve the look of the building for the neighbors to the east. And then just for reference, this is the north and south elevation of the building. Now, the proposal does meet all zoning ordinance requirements except for the development allowance for the parking setback. So they do meet the building setbacks. They meet the height of the building, 85 feet. The FAR also is code compliant at 3.49, where 4.5 is required. And as I mentioned, the number of parking spaces provided does meet the code. Now, the 3 development allowances they're seeking for, staff believes those are minor. Typically, we see development allowances that are either height or the density or FAR. In this case, this is for the setback of the parking spaces from the north property line, from the alley. The code requires 5-foot setback. The petitioner is proposing approximately 0 to 1-foot setback. Same thing for the proposed parking spaces along the south property line and then along the east property line. Based on our analysis, we do believe that the proposal is consistent with the surrounding zoning and land use classifications. The proposal is also consistent with the comprehensive general plan. The plan calls for convenient and diverse downtown as a center of activity in Evanston. The site layout will enhance the pedestrian character with the building in the front along Chicago Avenue, with improved streetscape, new trees, parking in the rear of the property, which is a preferred scenario with the loading and unloading away from the street, access to the parking area from the alleys. So that's a preferred layout for the site. The use is also a permitted use in the D4 district. It is a desirable use. It will add new daytime population to the downtown that would further enhance the vitality of the downtown. In addition, as I mentioned, staff recommends including that condition that the space on the ground floor be converted to a normal sort of a commercial space restaurant that would further enhance the pedestrian character and vitality of the project. Staff also believes that the proposal is consistent with design guidelines for the planned developments. The overall building mass and scale fit the surrounding two-story building to the north and the four-story Showmont building to the south, and also with the eight-story buildings to the east. Proposed building materials, which are brick and some metal accents, are the result of the developer's modifications based on the neighborhood input and the input from the area architects, and they do complement surrounding materials for the surrounding buildings. The proposal will also provide public benefits. Those are outlined in the staff reports. I'm not going to go into detail on those, but there will be improved streetscape, payment for the loss of on-street parking spaces, a new green roof on the southern portion of the building where the pool is located, and then some other benefits that are still being negotiated between the staff and the developer, and those should be finalized before the project is presented to the City Council. And then finally, the proposal does meet the standards for approval as outlined in the zoning ordinance, and therefore staff recommends Plan Commission make a positive recommendation to the City Council with the conditions outlined in the staff report. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Ford?
Could you just go back to the plan view that shows the upper floors, the room floors?
A request has been made to look at the plan view, which is now shown on the screen.
So I'd like to know, they're asking for a 5-foot setback for the parking. What is the intent of the 5-foot setback generally?
Per zoning ordinance, the requirement for a building, so any building including enclosed parking there's no setback, so it's a 0 setback. When it's open parking lot, the code requires a 5-foot setback, which is probably to assure adequate separation between the property line and the parking lot where one would install landscape screening, perhaps a fence, that kind of stuff.
Or sidewalk?
Other questions? Good.
What do you do with the snow removal, with a 0 setback for parking on the alley? How is that handled?
I think that question better be answered by the petitioner. They have been presented that question before the neighborhood meetings. They have stated that they're willing to come to terms with the surrounding property owners for some mutual arrangement for snow removal in the alley. And they do have a number of their parking spaces accessed off of the alley, so they would have to plow the snow. If they're going to haul it away, I'm not sure, but that may be better for them to answer.
Thanks.
Other questions of staff? The record should show that the city has received a set of notebooks which the staff have, and those contain project summary, statements addressing the standards, drawings, photographs, a survey, traffic study, special use permit application, disclosure of ownership, zoning analysis by the city, scheduled project development, market study, LEED, scorecard, and those are all part of the record. If the applicant is ready, and before you speak, let me ask anyone who's going to speak to raise the right hand. Do you swear you will tell the truth honestly to this commission? I see the attorney has taken that oath, so he may provide us with comments as well as argument.
I'm not sure how much testimony I'm going to be doing, but
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, regrettably, I've got to leave. May I say a few words before I do leave?
You may, and
Okay, thank you very much. And I've read all the materials, and I've made a few notes here. Generally, I like the project very much, and I would urge the commission to approve it and send it on to the council. The staff makes the same recommendation with conditions. Those are listed on page 3 of the staff memo, and I think they're all very good conditions. I'm not so sure about the need for another restaurant, but that aside, I think the ones that have been listed are sensible. I would add to those conditions a requirement that the developer pave the entire alley. It's a mess right now. But I think it will be a very welcome addition to the downtown landscape, and I'm looking forward to this project going forward. And I'm sorry I must leave, Mr. Chairman, but I must.
Thank you. We have now some statement from Mr. Arlebeck based on the notebook and staff recommendations, but of course not based on the testimony at this hearing. So we will take it as not being including the consideration of what is stated tonight. And now, if you may.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Plan Commission. My name is Greg Rains from the law firm of DLA Piper, and along with my colleague Katie Jenke Dale, we represent the applicant. I'm going to be very brief tonight. Demir did a very good job, I think, of walking through the project, and so I don't want to waste any more time than we have to. And unfortunately, some of our presentation will be repetitive from the staff presentation, but we'll try to be as efficient as possible. So without further ado, what we're planning to do after I speak, finish speaking, you'll hear a presentation from Tom Blunk, who's the developer, owner, operator from the Janko Group Quadrangle, and we'll make our presentation, and we also have all of our consultants here to answer any questions that you might have. So at this point, unless there's any questions, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Blunk and have him walk through the project. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. First of all, is there a way to turn down the lights? I don't know if everybody behind me can see okay. I recognize a lot of familiar faces behind me, and they're going to judge me tonight and see if I keep getting better at this presentation. Demir did a nice job. But while some of the stuff might be repetitive, yeah, we do think it's important, and we want to make sure that we do cover that. So first off, we're going to walk you through our presentation, some of what you just saw from Demir. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself, because I think it's really germane to this project. And so I'm almost an 8-year resident now here in Evanston. My wife and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out where we were going to locate. She was born and raised in the city. We happened to be moving from Kansas City. And Evanston weighed very heavily for us, and ultimately we did buy a house here and want to raise our family for the next 30 years. And so when we came to work on this project, I've been working on this project not really always from the city side, but with respect to the land seller for almost 5 years now, maybe 6. And it was important for me, sort of selfishly, I wanted to be close to family, have a project here. 2 is I do believe, and I think the city should be applauded for a lot of the sustainability things they do, and maybe developers aren't always known as green necessarily, but I think that's important. It's important for my kids. And so, I think to really be green, it's really to develop in urban locations where you have multiple modes of transportation. So this project had a lot of appeal for that for me. So I was willing to try and do a project in my own backyard, having been a resident for now 8 years, and that comes with some pros and cons. I've tried to be very sensitive to the neighbors. We've had a lot of good meetings. They're very well organized, they're very thoughtful, and we might probably hear from some of them this evening. And I think you'll see in our presentation that we've been very good listeners, and we've tried to accommodate a lot of their desires and changes as best we can as we went through this process. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about the hotel itself, and before I get into the extended stay stuff, as Demir pointed out, it's a 110-room, 8-story extended stay hotel, and I'm going to get into an extended stay hotel in just a few minutes. But some of those appeals for us were, as we looked at this site, and we considered multiple uses over the years, what would be best. And an extended stay hotel is what I would describe as a very light use. Our guests tend to stay long periods of time, and because of that, they don't always have cars. And so it's a very light use for what might be developed on this site. It's a vacant site in the periphery of downtown. It's important not to have vacant sites in downtown, obviously, and we think that we'll walk through some benefits that this project will bring as well, in addition to the public benefits. So with that, I'm going to switch to the next screen here and talk about the extended stay guest. So as I alluded to, they tend to be longer term stays. Typically, they're just over 5 days. The typical hotel, which you might know as a select service, as a flag example, a Courtyard by Marriott, those stays are typically just over 2 days. And our customer is very much a professional who's on assignment. They are, consultants, and they could be a team of consultants. They could be an IT team working on a hospital project. They could be visiting Northwestern. They could be auditors, tax people of those nature. But they want a home away from home. They want an office away from the office, and they want amenities and a social gathering place. As Demir alluded to earlier, we have been working with a flag called Hyatt House, which is a Hyatt brand. And Hyatt House is a fairly new flag. There's about 70 of them in the country. But we think that they have a very good design, very well-designed product. We think that as a company that they're poised to do very well. They're going to support this flag, and we think it would be a really good fit in terms of a flag. We have not signed a franchise agreement with them. We have a letter of intent that's been signed, and we really need to work our way through the entitlement process before we ultimately sign a franchise agreement. But that's our desire, is to work out a deal with Hyatt. The customers, because they tend to stay these longer periods of time, a lot of the rooms will have kitchenettes. And those kitchenettes are so that somebody can go down to the Whole Foods and buy groceries and cook their own meals if they want to. And that's a little atypical than your traditional stay. But again, they want that home away from home feel. Because of that, there's a greater impact that our customers have on the neighboring businesses. So it's not just, they went out for a drink or they went out for dinner. They might actually go do dry cleaning goods and services that you wouldn't traditionally have. We think that's a great thing for Evanston and the neighboring businesses. They tend to be budget conscious, so the longer term stays, you have to usually discount your rate to get that longer term stay. That makes sense from an economic model. The urban site tends to attract guests without cars. The rental cars sometimes are more expensive than the hotel rooms nowadays with all the taxes that they add on. So we really won't know at the end of the day the ultimate car usage for the site, but we expect it to be relatively light, and that's why we want to have a comfort level of 35 parking stalls on site, so roughly about a third of the rooms. We are going to have probably another third of those rooms parked off-site, and over the course of the first year or two, we'll figure out ultimately how many of those people really are cabbing over from the airport and not having a car, and what sort of off-site demand needs we have. Those off-site demand needs can take place through either a public parking garage here at the city. Church Street Garage, 1 block due north of us, is the likely scenario. We've talked to the city about leasing bulk spaces there, so another positive for the city. And we've also got a private garage option, sort of kitty corner across the alley from us. I can point out on a future slide. There's a 10-story office building, and the office building obviously empties out at night, and so that parking garage is a potential for us to strike a deal. That building just happened to sell very recently, so we have finally reached out to the new owner. We've got their name and number, but they haven't responded to us just yet. I mentioned earlier the project attributes, aside from the project benefits. And for me, I'm sort of like every Evanston citizen, I get a little shell-shocked every year when I get my tax bill. And so one of those big pluses was that this project, through the hotel tax and increased real estate taxes, will bring anywhere from $600,000 to $850,000 of new money into the system. The majority of that goes to Evanston. I think our projection showed $570,000 a year over, call it 20-plus years, going into Evanston or the school district directly. The Cook County gets a little bit of a share of that. So that's a huge economic impact, and we think that's a real positive. As Demir pointed out, I think earlier, we're not asking for any municipal incentives. The conceptual plans meet code with the exception of the 5-foot parking setback allowance that we're looking for. The 8-story height in building materials are consistent with the neighborhood. As you'll hear a little bit later, we're going to have our architect talk a little bit about the design changes we worked with the neighborhood to make what we thought was a very well-designed project even better and fit into the neighborhood. This will be the first LEED Silver hotel in Evanston. Again, I applaud the city for having those criteria to meet right out of the box. I think that those are all good things. The hotel product is not currently served in Evanston, and nor is it really served on the North Shore. So I know there may be some demand questions later on, but there's sort of a hole in the donut. You really have to go to downtown Chicago or almost up to Lake Cook Road. Having said that, near the Old Orchard Mall, there is a building under construction, an extended stay hotel. It's a Marriott Residence Inn. We had talked to them about this site. They had a strong desire to be in Evanston. But quite frankly, they couldn't wait. So they went to technically what's in Wilmette, even though it really borders the line with Skokie. They got a significant financial incentive to do so. And so that project's not quite complete, but if you drive by Old Orchard and I-94, you'll see that it's fairly well up. The guests, as Demir mentioned earlier, are going to bring a lot of street life to the peripheral area. And we'd like to talk about the first floor because maybe we haven't done a good job of communicating really what's happening there for the public. And then from a job perspective, we think this will bring 200 construction jobs. It's a 15-month construction project. And then there'll be ultimately 25 permanent hotel jobs created. And those jobs will be all across the pay scale spectrum. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback there. Those will be across the pay scale spectrum. And 15 of those will be a sort of maximum per shift. And most importantly today in our world, this project's financeable today. We've got a number of quotes from lenders to make sure that if we get approval that this project can actually proceed forward. I would tell you that timing's very important to us. Our contractor would love to get into the ground this summer so that he can sequence things up so that if hopefully we won't go through another winter like this, but the normal winters are bad enough to build through, so you gotta deal with those challenges. As a company, before I sneak into the presentation here, I won't bore you with too much time, but my partners and I typically do suburban office and industrial sort of development. My one partner, Gary Janko, has a hospitality firm called Janko Hospitality. They own 15 hotels. But this is an example of our commercial experience, predominantly throughout the Midwest. We do have a big project out in California, and I can speak to anything later on if anybody has any questions about those projects. But I do think a picture's worth 1,000 words, and what you see there is really Class A stuff. That's what we try to do, and we tend to be long-term holders. We usually don't, we're not a merchant builder. We don't build and sell typically. It's not, we look at every asset at the end of the day and assess it once it's stabilized, but we tend to be long-term holders. This is on the hospitality side. I made reference to my partner, Gary Janko, and his hospitality group. They have 15 hotels. Most of them are limited service and extended stay products. So a limited service example would be a Holiday Inn Express, where they don't offer a food option other than a very limited sort of breakfast scope, and then extended stay, which we've discussed before. That tends to be what the portfolio is comprised of, mostly throughout Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. But our most recent and biggest project was a purchase of a failed existing hotel in Naperville, Illinois. It's 425 rooms, 26,000 square feet of meeting space, right off Naperville Boulevard in I-88. It was formerly a Holiday Inn Select. And we took it back from the bank essentially literally the next day, shut it down, gutted it. Our contractor did all the work, and it was, I think, a 16-month process because you were dealing with an existing structure, but took essentially everything out but the walls. It was a very successful project. It wound up winning Marriott's opening of the year for all of Marriott at that time. Admittedly, coming out of a recession, there wasn't as much competition as in the past. And the city of Naperville was a really good partner in this particular case. Typically, Naperville's never given any incentives, but the only way that deal worked was a $10 million bond incentive, and they were very helpful. And to date, the hotel's been open for almost 2 years. We still own it, and it's been a nice success story. When we went through this process early on and we looked at other uses of the site, it was important for us to pick the proper architect. And so we had a relationship with Solomon Corbell Benz Architects, and you're going to hear from Devin Patterson of their firm a little bit later tonight and talking about some of the design. But this is an example of some of the buildings that they do, and I'll point out here in the middle is the Mather, which is literally right around the corner. And I know that that was a long entitlement process, but I think the building, as I know it, was very well received post-construction. I think it's a very pretty building. And this is an example of buildings of similar scale that they do. This is one of their more premier buildings downtown Chicago called the Legacy, right off of Grand Park. So a little bit later, Devin will talk to the changes that were made as we went through the process. So now we get to the meat of the presentation. Demir covered where the site is, so I'll skip through. There's another little close-up of it. These are photos of the surrounding area for those of you who aren't exactly familiar. It's a vacant site today. In 2011, the tenant, Howell & Martin Goley Insurance Company, who'd been there for, I think, 40 years, moved out. The building on the interior in particular was in a state of disrepair, and the owner didn't want to invest the money that would take to keep it going, and so had been dealing with us for a number of years to try and buy the property and redevelop it as something else. Originally, some of you may recall, it was part of the property to the north where the Giordano's is now, in the two-story historic building to the north, that it was a package deal, and I think Optima had planned I want to say it was an 18 or 20-story complex at that juncture that would bridge the alley. So we're only buying just the site south of the alley. What it does show is that we're surrounded here by 8. There's a 10-story building, medical office building. That's where the parking garage is. That might be a private option. And then we're surrounded by some 8-story residential buildings and a 7-story directly south of us. There's a little parking area between the building and our site. And then there's the 4-story Choma building that is directly adjacent and abuts our site, a portion of our site, and you'll see that on the site plan as I click through. This is some more photos looking southwest in the upper left-hand corner from across the site, and then looking northwest across from the alley. And what you'll see there is a lot of ductwork. We think our building will be a nice screen for a lot of things that are unsightly right now that are being seen with the vacant site. I won't run through too much detail on the floor plan. I can certainly answer questions later, but I do want to pick up on the comment with regard to requiring a more, I think, I'm not sure what the words were, but a more traditional standalone restaurant bar. And it's our belief, first of all, that we're going to have 100 guests a day come in and out of the hotel, and those guests are really going to activate that corner. Obviously, some of those guests will be staying multiple times, but they'll be multiply in and out of that front door of that building. So now where you have a pedestrian area that's not very well accessed, we think this is really going to activate that. I mean, if you just did simple math and said 100 people a day, 365 days a year, I mean, it's 36,000 some people. They're going to have friends and guests, and maybe it's 40, 45. But we think that's a huge positive impact. And so restaurant topic aside, we think that will accomplish some of the desires of the city from that perspective. As Demir pointed out, everything in gray is really the back of house. So this is the kitchen area, and this is the on-site laundry. And then on the south end, we have some meeting space. This is not a meeting hotel. The Orrington would be considered a meeting hotel. It's got a lot of meeting facilities. It's a full-service hotel. You have to have a full-service kitchen to do those sorts of things. So we have 760 square feet of meeting space, very modest. They can be split up. And then you walk through the front door. This is the main lobby as you walk in. And Hyde House has what they call a host. That host wears a lot of hats. So he'll check you in. There's a little area that he can walk through to the bar area here, and he can get you a drink at the bar if he wants to. But they have a very efficient operating model. It's one of the things we like, so that you can use your staff very efficiently to do multiple things. This corner here is the restaurant breakfast area. So you convert the bar in the morning so that you can put the food there, and then the restaurant area is seated here. We need to seat about 75 people by nature of the flag requirements. So you have to have the ability to do that sort of seating. And then on the south side of the lobby is what they call the social sort of seating or gathering area, and that has very specific furniture so that you can come work on your laptop, whether you're a guest or not of the hotel. You can come and work on your laptop and be in a social setting, but still have some level of privacy. Plug your computer in. We'll have Wi-Fi, and you can hook up to the Wi-Fi as well. On the restaurant side, these windows here are going to be operable, and so that was one of the things that we did to try and invite people down, respectful of the city's comment that they want to make sure that we're activating this area of downtown. And so we have put some operable windows. That's a little atypical, but we think that'll be a very nice touch. I would point out that the part of our trouble is we've got, as a flag, we have to accommodate the flag desires. The extended stay model is very specific, and we were sort of led to that extended stay flag to protect some of the other flags that are represented already here in Evanston. And so, this is a 10-seat bar, and then there's a number of seats here, probably 30 or so, that get serviced by that bar as well, or lounge. The kitchen will serve it's more than appetizers. You can get a chicken sandwich, a salad, and things of that nature, but they'll have an appetizer menu as well. And all of that, and maybe we've just done a poor job of communicating this, all of this is open to the public. And so we do think that'll be a draw. Now, I know when I'm downtown, I travel a lot, that hotels are great places to go if I got downtime between meetings, if I want to meet a friend. I know they usually have a restaurant or food service, some sort of option. And so I know that we can go and get those things. Now, maybe not everybody knows that, but I do think people learn that, and they learn that pretty quickly. And when you see the hotel flag, there's sort of a natural draw with respect to that. And so we think that we're going to attract the general public, a certain segment of that general public who wants to come in, maybe use their laptop a little bit, grab a glass of wine, whatever. So then as we go to the back side of the property, this is the loading dock right here. So all the loading will be off-site. Because the project has laundry on site, we don't have a lot of truck deliveries. We think we'll probably have 3 or 5 a week. But everything will be kept off the alley. We know alley congestion is very much a concern for the neighbors. This area here is the outdoor screen dumpster area, and so the dumpsters have been sized so that we only have 1 garbage pickup a week. We got 3 dumpsters ready to regular trash and 1 for recycle, and so very low impact from a loading perspective. As Demir pointed out, we got 34 parking stalls plus 1 compact here at the corner. We have agreed to make sure that the commercial trucks go around in north and exit Davis Street. We think that makes a lot of sense. All of these residences here have parking up against the alley, and they tend to go to the south, and they prefer that direction go north. We'll accomplish that through signage and in our contracts with the vendors to make sure that they do that. I'll flip through. This is a plan that shows just what I mentioned, how the trucks will exit north to Davis Street and make the turn. We had to convert the corner stall to compact to do that, and we lost it towards the count. And I guess I haven't said it yet. When we tried to develop a project that met the comprehensive plan downtown and fit within the envelope of what the zoning code allows, it was very difficult. It's a half-acre site, and there's a lot that has to go on there to do it. And so at the end of the day, while a number of the stalls, probably a third of the stalls are actually covered here, we do have some stalls north and south that are not covered, that ultimately 7 of them off the north-south alley abut the alley and 2 off the east-west alley. We felt that was a reasonable concession to make and ask for with respect to our use of the property. And I do think it's important to point out that the prior use, which was a single-story office building, about 12,000 square feet, they had 40 cars on site. So they actually had more cars on site than we're proposing. And those cars did back up. They had 10 to 12 spots that backed up directly off the alley. And so from a use perspective, prior to what we're proposing today, again, we think we're a lighter use. And that doesn't mean that we're not sensitive to the neighbors' concerns that also back up off of their alley spaces. So this slide just simply shows turn movements in and out of the alley for a traditional sized car that shows that it works. This slide here, and I know we're going to probably talk about this evening, there is an existing tree that is right about here where the laser pointer is. And so when the owner of the site, not us, had demolished the building, and there were some other trees that were demolished as part of that, they left a tree here that's right on the property line. And so by right, we can take that tree down and make a contribution to the park. That's what we had proposed. There's a lot of feedback from the neighborhood that they love the tree and they don't want to see it go. There is some question with respect to the species. It's American elm, so it's subject to Dutch elm disease. It has lost its natural Y, but it is a big tree and it does provide a lot of nice shade and to add to the back alley. It's unusual to have sort of a mature tree like that. We're sensitive to that. However, we do have to construct the building. The building this is the line of the building out here. The branch of that tree extends almost up to the building where we'd be doing vertical construction, so it composes a constraint. Also, what doesn't show up on this plan, and I'll try and outline it here with a rectangle where the laser pointer is, we have a 60 by 30 underground detention basin, and so that's, you got to detain water per the city code. There's no place to put it else on the site. It doesn't fit up here. So that goes in, and so our landscape architect was concerned that that would cause severe root damage and the tree probably wouldn't survive. And then you have, if you wanted to take that risk and keep the tree there, then you had a question with respect to would those cars and asphalting so close up to the tree pose a problem. We have proposed, well, a couple of things we did. One is, and let's flip to this 2 slides ahead. Demir had really a yellow roof. Mine's, I don't know, a pea green roof, I guess. But we did add a green roof. That wasn't part of the deal originally. Structurally, you really have to enhance your structure to it. It's at a great expense, but we thought that was a good green thing to do. We heard the neighbors really wanted it. We understood it, and so we added that with respect to the tree topic that we were going to have to deal with on the backside. The other thing that we've proposed is, and then we've also upsized these trees off of Chicago Avenue. They were originally 4-inch caliper Triumph elms, and we upsized those to 6-inch. So as an alternative, we've thrown out there that we're open to the concept. It's not what we've proposed, but we're open to dialogue about putting in a new tree of 9-inch caliper, a better species, and that it would be a Triumph elm that's not subject to Dutch elm disease. Big enough at that stage they would have a real impact. So it'd have a 25 to 30 foot height, and it would also have a 15-foot what they call spread immediately out of the box. And that's about as big as you can go because of transportation issues. But we're willing to do that. That means that this stall would have to be compact, and the city would have to agree to a compact stall. And this stall here on the south, which would require neighbor cooperation, we've reached out to the neighbor. We've talked to the property manager. He's talking to the owner. We've not heard back from them yet as to whether or not they would be willing to cooperate. But I just want to point out that that is something we did consider to solve it. Flipping through the outdoor terrace, we mentioned earlier there's a fitness center on the 2nd floor. The pool is still in discussion. It's been downsized. The flags allowed us to downsize it. I was talking to somebody in the audience before who said, why do you need a pool? And it's just simply to check off the box. I mean, the reality is our guests typically aren't going to use it. It's good for families with young kids. It's not that we would never have one. So we're still having dialogue with respect to that topic. We would like to add 3 more rooms and get rid of the pool. I'm not sure if that'll happen. Our application, so everybody knows, is for 114 rooms. The plans that you're seeing tonight show 110 because of the pool. And so we might get to 113, but we wanted to make sure that we could maximize the parking that we had on site. This is flipping through a typical floor plan. This is the room breakdown of 115 rooms as we go through it. And then at this juncture, I'd like to hand it off for a few minutes to our architect, who can walk you through a lot of the exterior design changes we went through, because one of the, sort of a new process here in the city, we worked with Mark and Demir and their staff and the aldermen in the neighborhood to really go through and get something that everybody was happy with. The flag has a very specific look. I'll point out before the architect does, of the top hat that they like in the metal panel, and so trying to work and satisfy everybody. And with that, I'll hand it off to Devin Patterson here for a few minutes.
Are there questions for Mr. Blanc from the commission?
And I'll be back up if you want to wait, or however you want to do it.
No questions at this time. We'll ask them later.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Devin Patterson. I'm a design principal at Solomon Cordwell Benz. I've led the design process with Tom Blanc and his company, Janko Group Quadrangle, for this project for quite a few years. We've been looking at quite a few different uses for this site and settled upon the design that you see in front of you currently. It's fair to say that we did look at quite a few different options for the site as we started to try to find the appropriate way to mass the building on the site. And just one thing, I just want to flip back quickly to the site plan, the more aerial site plan here. One thing that we did as we started to look at the site itself, we recognized that there were some tall buildings, 8 stories, and there's a 10-story building to the east here. And we were looking to orient a new building on the site that was roughly 8 stories, which fits in the zoning requirements for the site. What we did in sympathy for the neighbors here, we tried to orient the building in a way that it would be less disruptive to the neighbors as far as views are concerned here. So instead of locating the larger 8-story portion of the building at the corner of the site, we actually pulled it back from the site, which aligns it with the building directly to the east and allows views around the building as much as possible. It also creates a large buffer between the 8-story portion and the 2-story portion to the building to the south here, allowing for that green roof to be applied in this location here. But we were very satisfied, we thought, with this solution. We thought it worked urbanistically and also worked for the neighbors. Before we go in, and then we can go into the exterior design. As we developed the exterior design for the project, we came up with the solution that you see here on the left-hand side. We worked with Hyatt Corporation and worked with their design standards, which included some elements here to create a feature at the corner of the building here. And some of those through the public process and through meetings with the aldermen and some architects that she had chosen to work with us have been modified and improved to their liking, I think. And I think we've developed this through the public process into something that's going to be an excellent piece of architecture for the city of Evanston. One of the things that we early on tried to do is we tried to create continuity between the Chaumont building to the south and the Giordano's building to the north. And so we introduced some limestone at the base here, tried to create a very wide open glassy corner so you could see into this bar restaurant that's part of the ground floor public space of the building here. One of the features of the design of the building is this metal panel that features the corner of the building that rises up to the top here. In some of the meetings early on with the city, there was concern about the height being out of scale with the buildings. So we've worked with staff to reduce the height of that. This one recognizes a 5-foot total reduction in the height in the perimeter of it, and it also reduces the height of it by 2 feet. And as you look at the building too, and I've got some larger scale drawings of it here, but we've also had a detail to the top of the building that gives it more of a top. We've also integrated fan coils that are vertical in orientation into the windows, so they're less less distracting on the facade. And then as part of one of the major things that we did between the two concepts here is we developed an all brick building with a small stone base at the base here. This was really to differentiate the building from the building to the south. We didn't want to diminish the quality of the architecture to the south by trying to replicate that. So there was a distinction made between the two. So that's the sort of the major difference between the two projects, between the two designs. There's also a cornice that has been added here that kind of is sympathetic with the cornice of the Chamont building to the south. The storefront windows, although being slightly taller, create a rhythm that is about the same as the building to the south. So those are some of the major compromises that we've done to improve the quality of the design of the building. And so you can see those details further here. One of the other aspects too was some of the detailing on the building here. Originally this was a more brilliant silvery color. We've worked to come up with much more of a subdued pewter color. The scale and detail of that is a little finer, so that we feel it fits in with more of a natural looking material on the site. We've also added some brick detailing at the tops of these windows here. This would be a reveal where a brick would be pushed in about 3/4 or 3/8 of an inch, so it would create a texture not unlike a building that you would see probably by Frank Lloyd Wright or other architects, where you would create some texture at the top of the building, but it helps to create this cornice line at the top of the building, which was a desire of the staff. We've also introduced a belt course of limestone, or simulated limestone. It's a cast stone product that wraps all the way around the building here. We did introduce windows at the top here, so the building does have a proper top and a connection to the top. The building itself, also it comes all the way to the ground. That was one of the things that we did to really kind of accentuate the corner, and that leads one's eye to the front door, which has this canopy that projects out over the public way here, but is a welcoming way to signify the entrance to the building. I think that's generally the scope of the exterior design. We do have some perspectives that show how the building also connects to the existing neighborhood. We feel it fits in very well with the 8-story buildings that are to the east. And obviously it's shorter than the 10-story building to the north here. And then you can see here how this green roof will become a public amenity for all the neighboring buildings to look into. And then there's some straight-on elevations if you wanted to see it in straight-on versus the perspective. We also did, as Tom alluded to, we did also work with the flag to introduce a window, which is not part of the typical prototype here on the east facade, so that we did enhance the view and the architectural design of the the east side of this building. And then just to kind of close, I wanted to talk about the materials that are proposed here. We've kind of given a range of brick colors here, sort of in this red family. The material itself would have, inside the bricks themselves, there would be sort of a variation in color, which we call range, which will give some character, and it'll kind of pop out the scale of these bricks. We're proposing utility-sized bricks, which are 4 inches high by 12 inches wide here. And then the details on the building will be this simulated limestone, which is a cast stone product, which is predominantly limestone chips, so it's got a very natural appearance to quarried limestone, but it's a much more durable and long-term material for this application. And then the metal panel itself, we're showing the color that's generally the color that we're choosing here for the pewter color of that. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
I'll just say, in just a short closing here, with respect to the community involvement, I think it has been positive, and that was a positive relief. One of the things that I didn't point out earlier on the slide for the site plan is the stalls that do have direct access off the alley. There was a concern raised by the neighbors about SUVs and overhang, and so we're sensitive to that. and we have agreed to put signage up prohibiting SUVs from parking in those 7 stalls so that we don't have an overhang issue. But I do think that that also speaks to, again, this spirit of community trying to listen to the neighbors at the meetings that we've had and address their concerns as best we can. With that, I'll hand it back to Chairman Peters or Demir.
There was a question asked earlier regarding snow removal.
This is a very
the zero
germane topic
setback.
this year. It has come up at prior neighborhood meetings, as obviously this year it's on everybody's mind. There'll have to be a snow plowing plan. We did talk about the fact that right now there's no coordinated plan by all the buildings, and they all use the alley for that access. When our operational team gets involved, we'd be happy to try and spearhead that. It's easier said than done sometimes, but obviously we'll have to have a plan for our site that accommodates it. And the one thing I can say is that the good news in the hotel business is that December, January, and February are the worst occupancy months. And so, to lose a stall or two for snow piling is probably what's going to happen, because we probably won't need it, quite frankly, to answer the question.
Are there other questions from board members? Mr. Ford?
Where's the staff going to park?
Yeah, so we have to accommodate the staff in the parking count. So we have 15 full-time max employees, so we have to provide 3 spots for the staff by code. Doesn't mean they have to park there. They'll probably park in the public garage down the street, because we'll want to maximize those stalls for our guests.
Thank you.
Other questions? Are there questions from the public? We have a chance for questions now and then comments later. Are you going to have any other witnesses?
We have our whole team available, our contractor, traffic consultant, civil engineer. Everybody's here tonight, our landscape architect, so if there's any specific questions, we're happy to have them available to, if you don't want to hear from me.
Members of the board, go ahead.
I have a question for the architect, just about material palette. You showed 3 kinds of brick. One had an iron spot, one was... Which, is there one that's selected, or is that just, is it?
I don't think we've
Just
actually
in that
selected.
range.
I can't get to that. I don't know if you can get to that slide there.
We've not selected yet.
We have not selected the material yet. I thought we were trying to put in a range of what we're trying to achieve here. So,
And have you defined the metal panel? Is it a composite aluminum or?
it'll be a composite aluminum panel with it's got a coursing that's probably about 8 inches on center, so it'll have a horizontal banding to it, and so there'll be a pronounced horizontal joint, but it'll have a nice scale that'll be consistent with the brick on the building there. So you'll see that, and you can sort of see that in this perspective here. I tried to illustrate that. There's some banding that goes horizontally on that, so I think
So it's the insulated panel, an insulated panel, or like a solid phenolic core?
it'll be I think it'll be an aluminum panel on the outside. Whether it's a plate or whether it's a composite panel, it hasn't been determined yet, but the jointing will be consistent with the horizontal lines that are illustrated on the drawings here. I don't know if the gentleman that's running the computer can zoom into the, I don't have a close-up other than to zoom into the pictures. So. Yes, it is. There are, if you look at the elevation here, there are windows located in the metal panel, and then the rest of it's solid space that looks into the, so you don't see into the hotel unit behind that.
If there are no questions from the board at this time, we'll take questions from the public. No, if there's... Did you have a question, Mr. Sarro?
I have a question. This is in Alderman Fisk's ward, and is Alderman Fisk present? Okay. And does the Alderman have a position regarding this particular request by the developer? No position? Okay. And can staff indicate what, if any, issues or comments Ms. Klotz had when it went before
Spark?
yes.
I talked to Ms. Klotz, and her concern was the parking setback off of the alleys and direct access into the 7 parking spaces off of the alleys.
Okay. And there's also an indication that the public benefits have not been finalized yet? And so is that something that's going to be worked out or before we are being asked to vote on this particular request?
I don't believe so. Typically, the public benefits are negotiated prior to the council and at the council level, so usually the Plan Commission, that's my understanding, does not get involved into that. I do list that in the staff report just so that there's some knowledge of what they are.
Okay, so it doesn't tie in directly or indirectly to the elements that we have to consider?
I
No.
think that's correct.
Okay, just want to get confirmation on that.
The Alderman is approaching the podium.
I'm assuming that Judy Fisk, First Ward Alderman. I'm assuming that what you were asking me for is if I had a personal opinion on the project, and I don't think that's appropriate for me right now. I will tell you that we've had one public meeting, a ward meeting, where we've discussed. We've also met with architects in the immediate area. The developer was kind enough to come and join in that discussion. Where I'm sure he told you that there were changes based on those discussions. There are continuing concerns that the residents of this area have about the loss of the tree and about the setbacks in the alley specifically. And we have other concerns too. I mean, the heat generated by the asphalt, things like that. But again, I'm feeling that through this process, we're going to be able to deal with those. I believe staff has recommended that the size of the vault be reduced, so that we can keep the tree. I think that tree is extremely important, and I think the setbacks in the alley are also very important in terms of access and safety in the area. So you'll hear from the neighbors, but again, it's important that you listen to the folks that are going to be affected by this project and not to what my own personal opinion is, because obviously I'm here to represent them.
Thank you, Alderman. And I had actually asked a question, and not to probe, your personal position, but I have the utmost regard and deference to, elected officials, especially aldermen, whether this city or any other city. And I asked that question because, like staff makes a recommendation, I give great deference, tempered by our responsibility and judgment on the commission in deciding or basically making recommendations. So I ask that because it is, for me as a commissioner, important to accord that deference and understand what the alderman's position is for their constituents, not personally.
Right.
And that's why I was asking.
Good, and I appreciate that a lot. And I think those of you who have taken the time to go and visit this site and have a little bit of history about the site, you know that there have been other projects for the site that were, totally out of proportion to what would be preferable there. And again, those concerns aren't going to go away. We've got an alley that is basically being used as a street and has been used as a street for a long time. And that as other buildings have been constructed on the site, it becomes even more important that the use of that alley be looked at and considered very carefully. And that's one of the reasons why we're asking for the setbacks. If you know my position on the Kendall project, for example, that came, we worked very, very hard to retain the oak trees on the Kendall site, and we're successful doing that with the cooperation of the developer. I think in this case, we've got one tree that is extremely important to some of the neighbors. This is a very, very heavily built-up block with a lot of residents who are affected by what goes on this site. And again, I want to compliment the developer for being willing to participate in that discussion, even though he's required to do that. He did it cheerfully, and I appreciate that. But like I said, there are continuing concerns about the alley and the tree and some other concerns that the neighbors will raise. That's my job. I'm the elected official. I'm here to listen to them and hope that you will do the same.
Any other questions at this time? Hearing no questions, it is 12 minutes after 8. I suggest, Mr. Galloway.
A question for the architect. Do we have a proposed sample finish and color for the window frames and storefront?
I don't think we have it with us today. We could provide that to the commission.
Could you describe it, please?
The windows themselves, the storefront, we're looking at a bronze colored, not bronze, but a kind of a dark bronze colored storefront, so a dark metal storefront. The glass would be as transparent as possible so you could see into the space. I think that was the question, was on the ground floor. Or are you also interested in the windows of above grade?
Well, windows above grade as well.
Okay. The windows above grade would be, and I don't think we've got that specifically defined yet, whether it's a metal window or a vinyl window in this location. And it would be probably a lighter color, so we could provide that to the commission if needed. So. It's something that hasn't come up, I guess, until this point. So I think the illustrations here are kind of indicating the colors that we would provide for the building.
I'd be very interested in knowing specifically what those are, because I think that you've got a fine design, and I think I would hate for you to make to stumble and misplace the color of the frames.
We'd be very, very happy to provide that.
I'm hearing no other questions, and I suggest we take a break till. You have a question, ma'am? Could you identify yourself?
Oh, sure. Linda Damashek.
You can pull that down.
Linda Damashek. You might do this as a matter of course.
Could you give your address?
1318
and
Judson.
Spelling of your name.
Damashek, Damashek, 1318 Judson.
Thanks.
You might do this as a matter of course, but since you were asking about getting the materials for the windows, I just wanted to make sure that you get the samples for the metal and the bricks that they select as well. General question.
Just to point out, staff does have that, and after break, I will go up to my office to bring that down. So we do have samples of brick, the limestone material, and the initial proposal for the metal, although I believe the metal material has changed since then, but I'll bring what we have.
Okay, and that they will provide the sample of the changed metal material.
They can if the commission requires that, or
That would be my request as a member of the public. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Question, is this in a TIF district?
I do not believe so.
No? Okay.
Other questions? Hearing no questions, let's take a 10-minute recess. If you plan to speak, to give your opinion individually, if you could sign up on the sign-up sheet just outside the door, that would be helpful to us. If there are group presentations, approach me so we can be sure to accommodate that. And I'll be somewhere in the foreground so we can find out who has group presentations. I will take comments usually in the order on the sign-up sheet. Thank you. If you have not been sworn as a witness and you wish to make some comments, please raise your right hand. You swear you'll tell the truth, the whole truth to the commission. Thank you. Could you identify yourself and name and address, and then we'll proceed.
Yes, my name is Christine Westerberg, and I live at 525 Grove. I'm the president of the 525 Grove Condo Association, and I'm representing the Hinman Grove neighbors, who are essentially the residential condo buildings that border the site to the south and the east. So first of all, I wanted to say that we've appreciated the process that Alderman Fisk has sent up with the developer over the last several months, and we appreciate the developer's responses to many of the comments that were brought up at the earlier community meetings. It's been a nice change to have a reasonably amicable conversation, and we appreciate that. There are, however, several key components of the plan that we do have some issues with that we feel do not support city standards and that pose a problem for the community. Basically, this centers around the concern about setbacks, which I think all of you have heard already in terms of being one of our main concerns. The city does require the 5-foot setbacks, which really are kind of our unnecessary buffer, we think, between commercial and residential properties. The plan as proposed does push the 8-story tower, extends all the way to the property line on the west side of the north-south alley. Now, the 3 adjacent buildings on the east side of the alley, which are the commercial building at 500 Davis, 1508 Hinman, and 1516, do obey the setback. And Demir, if you can go to the next photos. A little hard to tell here, but those 3 buildings are set back from the alley, and even some of their parking areas are set back from the alley. The next photo shows the 1508 Hinman building. There we go. The 1508 Hinman building on the next photo has a garage which is also set back from the alley. So we think this is a standard that this new development should meet and should stay compatible with the existing developments that we have. The other problem with the setbacks is that it will have an impact on traffic in the alley. And if you can show the next slide. All of you, I think, have heard this. This is a 2-way alley that runs north and south between Davis and Grove. And it is highly traveled, both commercial and residential vehicles. And quite frankly, it has a lot of pedestrian traffic as well. Now, as planned, the building columns, some of the building columns are located all the way to the end of the property, at the property line. And as planned, cars in the north center section of the hotel's lot will be parked right up to the alley. The concern here is that we will not have sufficient swing space for all of the vehicles in the alley. If you can show the next slide. No building setbacks just means reduced visibility and more congestion, which we feel then does not meet the standard for special use. The next photo, a little hard to see here. This was taken in the midst of a little bit of a snowstorm, but what can happen in the alley is that delivery vans will simply park in the middle of the alley. When that happens, you cannot get around those vans. There simply isn't enough room in the alley to swing on either side. That obviously produces a good deal of problems for congestion. The next slide. This slide shows a better model. This is at 1516 Hinman, where the building, of course, is set back from the alley, which you can see, plus their parking stalls are much longer. And this does give the cars at 1516 Hinman the ability to pull up a little bit. Obviously, no property owner wants traffic in the alley getting onto their property, but this does offer a little more swing space. And we feel that's rather important for this development to achieve as well. So I'm sure some of the other neighbors will be able to share more photos, but I wanted to give these photos as a basic indication of what some of the problems can be with the current plan.
A question? Where in this photograph is the property line? Is it at the split between the asphalt and the cement, or is it
That's correct.
Okay, where the numbers are.
Correct.
Thank you.
Next slide. The other issue with setbacks is on the south end of the property. Because the proposed plan doesn't include a 5-foot setback there, this eliminates the 60-foot tree, which we've heard about tonight. This is currently, at least the trunk is located on the back 5 feet of the property to the south. Maintaining a significant natural feature is one of the standards for special use, and we really would like to see the developer work a little harder at this. If you can show the next slide. This is the tree itself, about 60 feet. You can see that the end of the property line is right there, really at the trunk. Sorry for the snow that's there, but it is quite a significant feature that we would like to maintain, and with a setback, we think we can be able to do that. We would also encourage the city and the developer to consider the use of perhaps porous asphalt in the parking lot, which together perhaps with a smaller detention structure might be able to achieve that goal. I'm going to show you some plans that are just an attempt to show a positive impact if we can maintain the setbacks. And again, I apologize to the developer. I cannibalized your plans and fooled around with them a little bit. But this is just an attempt to indicate why a small difference can mean a great deal. With the current plan, what you see here is the elevation. This is actually the south elevation of the tower, looking from the south end of the alley. The building to the right is the 1516 Hinman building. You can see the dotted line there, and it indicates where the alley begins. And then the red line there indicates a 5-foot setback. This is what's proposed. This is what we would like to see, is a real setback, which would give, first of all, a little more visibility there for pedestrians in the alley, and also allow for a little more light and air in that area as well. Now this is looking from the alley west, and you can see the east facade of the hotel there to the right. Other buildings which are located south or to the left. As currently proposed, the plan would have no setback on that southern end of the property. Next slide. If we could maintain the tree in that 5-foot setback, obviously the branches and the leaves do go into the hotel's property, but this would provide a rather significant buffer from a landscape perspective, and we think it would provide a pleasing feature for the hotel visitors as well. And that's really, I think, the substance of the neighbors' concerns with this development. I personally agree that this is a project that has a lot to give to the city. And in contrast to some other proposals that we've seen, I think it's a very responsible one, and I applaud the developer and his team for working on this. I know some of them, they're all very creative. So my hope is that they can really put that creativity to work and address some of these issues. We do have some construction concerns. I don't think the Plan Commission perhaps advises on this, but it is a pretty tight site. And as a result, we'd like to make sure that there are some steps taken by the city and the developer to work with the neighbors. And this would include a safety plan. It would include, during construction, really using the east-west alley from Chicago for all deliveries, keeping cranes and trailers away from the residential end, requiring vibration monitoring during the underground construction, establishing guidelines that we can all really agree with and endorse. I think this was done for the Mather project, which was obviously very complex, but it would be good to have some standards that everyone can agree to. And then we would like to get some information on the contractor's experience in building on a tight infill site. And that really represents the major concerns, and we appreciate your consideration. I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of this witness? The next person on my list is Mike Taft of 1508 Inman.
Good evening. My name is Michael Taft. I'm the president of the Evanstonian Cooperative Apartments at 1508 Hinman. I live on the 8th floor of the building, in the rear of the building, on the southwest corner of the building, and I have a commanding view of the building site since the moment we lived there, which began in 2009. I want to thank you all for, on the commission, for accepting us to speak this evening. I just wanted to give you a little background about myself. I started in construction in 1968. I started as a laborer at the Zion Nuclear Power Plant. I became a structural iron worker out of Local 1 in Chicago, Illinois. I've worked just about any kind of major industrial or commercial construction available, bridges over the Mississippi River, power plants, all kinds of things. Currently, I'm the safety director for Taylor Woodstone, which is a joint venture between Woodstone Builders of Bloomington, Minnesota, and the Taylor International, a major hospitality concern out of Las Vegas, Nevada. We currently do a lot of tribal building, building casinos, healthcare facilities, and hotels. I just wanted to with in mind the role I have as a safety person and my 45-plus years experience in major construction projects, I want everyone to know here, particularly the design, building, and development team, that this is an extraordinarily dangerous site for construction. I won't say anything more than that. We do want to make sure that we develop a very substantial site-specific safety plan for the neighborhood in conjunction with the city developer and the construction company. Part of that would be meeting with the superintendent of the project, that is to say the actual #1 person concerned with peak construction doing their work. Okay, I just wanted to have a few comments about porous asphalt paving. As it turns out, and this would be what we would recommend, that is to say the neighborhood mayors and or neighborhood residents, and it seems that the city staff has kind of endorsed that idea as well. Porous concrete, if you would put that on, please, Damir.
Is it part of this presentation?
Yeah, it should be the next one.
It's on the stick.
No, not that.
It's not on the, it's a different presentation.
Would be,
Bottom.
no, porous asphalt paving, right on the bottom. Wait for this sucker to come up. Okay, could you center it, please? Okay, porous asphalt paving. Porous asphalt paving is just that. When moisture falls on it, it goes through the paving. It doesn't deflect off. It doesn't flow off. It's been around since about 1970. It's a passive system. It's part of a sustainable aspects of current building ideas in terms of LED and all the rest of it. Anybody who's lived in Evanston in the past couple of years, particularly last summer, knows all about real heavy rains. When you have heavy rains, of course, you have tremendous movement of rain off of hard surfaces. So it's a tremendous problem throughout the region, and particularly in a place like Evanston. So that type of porous paving would be ideal for the 1550 site because of it has a deep sand substrate. There's about 70 feet of sand underneath before you start to hit the hard pan and then eventually the limestone. And there's snow and ice builds up on conventional paving. Porous concrete, it doesn't pave up nearly as much. It promotes slow, deliberate infiltration of water, improves water quality, and there's no surging with runoff. keep in mind, you've been on some big box store and you've seen when you have a big heavy rain, there's this tremendous surge of surface moisture just flows wherever gravity takes it. That doesn't happen with porous, and it wouldn't happen in this location. It would just go down through into the substrate. It's a very, it promotes real slow, deliberate infiltration of water and improves water quality. And once again, there's no surging runoff. It's very cost effective. It eliminates or reduces the need for retention, expensive retention structures. And it would also, in this case, allow the elm tree's root system to thrive in moist soil. Next slide, please, Mayor. This is a picture of a project we finished last summer. This is in Bayfield, Wisconsin. Bayfield, Wisconsin is on the shores of Lake Superior, which is right there. Okay, and if you take a look at this, notice the meltwater runoff. It's running on the conventional paving right here. Okay, so part of the project was to install this porous paving right here, this porous asphalt paving. So what happens, as you can see quite readily, this was just last Sunday, as it runs off, the material just goes, the water just goes right into the porous paving. And there's very low maintenance involved with porous paving. Next slide, please. Okay, once again, here, this is another shot. This is looking west, but you can see the water coming down here, and then it just disappears into the porous paving. It's the same thing that would happen at 1550. It would just go straight down. It wouldn't go into the storm sewers. It wouldn't go into the street. It wouldn't go into the alley. What you need to do is you use liquid de-icer, which is when clearing snow and things like that. And there's a very safe service for pedestrians. Give me the next slide, please. Okay, it's a very passive system. This one was installed in 2013. It does not retain ice. If you look right here, here's a big pile of snow, and you see that dark spot right there? That's the snow melting, and it's going right down into the porous concrete or porous paving. Right here is an example of what happens when the porous paving isn't cleaned. Okay, so what's happened is there's a lot of sand and clay in this area that's one of the features. So during the course of this winter time, it is accumulated on the hard surface, flows in here, and it's kind of filled in the little holes. But the way you maintain this stuff is you simply vacuum it once or twice a year with big street vacuums and things like this. So it works really, really well that way. It doesn't retain ice, as I say. Another real feature for the city, for the developer, for anyone, is no paving or no pavement heaving or cracking because of subsurface moisture. The subsurface moisture just infiltrates further and further down into the ground. Keep in mind that 1515 is sitting on a huge body of sand, and the whole front of the project sits on about 15 to 16 feet of concrete rubble at this point. Next picture, please. Okay, this has to do with the elm tree. I've stared at this elm tree for quite a while. This elm tree is quite healthy. I grew up in Highland Park. I know just what a healthy elm tree looks like and what a healthy elm tree does not look like. My view is that this is a very quite healthy and robust tree at this point. The tree is healthy because of the agronomy of the root system soil. In addition to being an iron worker and a construction person, I'm also a farmer. I own and operate a farm, and I do know about soil and how to grow things. And I witnessed personally how the demolition company went to great lengths to make sure that this tree was preserved. And one of the southeast corner of the site is free of broken concrete backfill. So this is the southeast corner of that site, and that's all dirt. There's no broken up concrete or any other kind of detritus or debris in there. The demo people, they backfilled it with a good black topsoil after removing the pavement. So it's in really good condition and it's ready to be saved. Okay, next picture. Now this is a site right off of Chicago Avenue, looking right down the property line, right next to where Vinnick is. And you can see the elm tree is right on the property line. So the elm tree is ideally suited for the neighbors and the developers. You know, when someone is away from home, is on the 7th floor on the south side of the extended stay hotel, and he wakes up in the morning, he grabs his coffee out of the little thing that you make your coffee in these kind of places. He looks out that window in the summertime, and there's a lovely, lovely tree with maybe even a Baltimore Oriole singing at him in the morning. So that's part of what this is all about. It's a very important thing that we really can strongly consider the absolute value of the elm tree. So it preserves the significant natural and environmental features of the area. And the Hyatt and patrons and neighbors will see a large, robust elm tree and its greenery and its wildlife. Give me the final picture, please. This is, I got out my trusty Stanley 30-foot tape, and right there, that's 5 feet. Okay, so for this is roughly where the property line is. So if we set that, observe the city code setback, we've got this tree within the 5 feet of that setback. That's 5 feet right there. So the elm tree will preserve the pleasing environment, as I said, for the neighbors and the Hyatt's backyard, and the character of Evanston and its attitude towards sustainable, practical land use will be very well demonstrated. And I think that's real important. You know, the city has gone to great lengths with it, describing itself as a green and LED-friendly place and things like that. And I think that this would be an ideal opportunity for the city and the developers to make that happen. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm here to answer them. But with that, I would just thank you very much for your time.
Are there any questions? Commissioners, public, Mr. Galloway.
What's the expected useful life of permeable asphalt paving as opposed to conventional paving?
Well, it's much greater. It's much greater because it's so much more flexible. If properly maintained, you know, its unit cost. You know, if you think of what the developer would have to do here in a conventional system, they would pave it, they'd have to put in a retention structure. So you've got all that money in this, you know, that aspect of it, that part of it. If you were to put in a good porous paving system, it would last much longer, it wouldn't crack. It would, you know, once again, also the moisture goes right through it. And ice doesn't, that's another issue too, very important, that ice does not form on this. It goes right through it. You know, the moisture just goes right through very quickly. And it heats up well enough too, but it's also cool in the summer. So it has greater advantages than conventional paving. And we've done it on a number of our projects. So we've been very, very happy with it. And these are large areas that we've done. We've done, you know, 30,000 square feet and that kind of thing of paving, and it works real well, particularly for parking lots and high pedestrian areas. You know, one of the things that happens is there's a danger from slipping on ice. And, you know, conventional paving is a lot slicker, both when it's wet and when it's icy, than this, because the aggregate is larger in porous paving, and it, you know, there's the adhesive qualities for pedestrian as well as drivers is really enhanced.
Other questions? Go ahead.
If the asphalt permeable paving was used in lieu of the present proposed paving, would the water retention vessel be eliminated? No. What would the impact be on it? Do we know? Roughly?
Just to answer from staff's point of view, at this point, the petitioner has not been required to submit engineering documents that provide engineering calculations for the stormwater detention size. Just to point out, when the engineers try to figure out the required vault size, they have to account for the stormwater runoff in the 100-year flood events. So when there's a lot of rain, that water has to go somewhere, and that's what typically the detention is for. The other point is that typically the properties are not allowed to increase the runoff from the property than what is already there. So usually the engineering structures account for both of those. So, but at this point, the petitioner has not been required to submit engineering documents.
Just to clarify, the calculations would be based only on the exposed parking or on the hard surface area occupied by the building?
For the entire site, all the impervious areas are proposed.
Any other questions?
Would the green roof contribute positively in that respect?
Yes, typically they do, and perhaps there's somebody on petitioner staff that is more better suited to answer these questions. But from my knowledge, the rooftops, green rooftops, and swales that are typically designed at the edge of asphalts are designed to provide stormwater runoff infiltration systems, and they're used for credits towards stormwater cleaning and stuff like that.
There we go. As a related question to the past testimony to the staff, is there a 5-foot required building setback, or is it only parking?
No, there's not. The setback is a requirement for parking, open parking only. So the building which is located on the lot line is permitted. There's 0 setback requirement for building and enclosed parking.
Other questions? Hearing no more questions, Howard, looks like Vokus. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it.
My name is Howard Vakes. I am the president of the Hinman House Condominium Association. That's the building at 1516 Hinman Avenue. I had asked Mr. Latinovich if he would bring up the well, you can leave that photo up for the moment, but what I would really like is for you to bring up that that slide you had that showed the zoning, the breakdown of zoning. This view looks down the alley toward the north from Grove Street, and coincidentally, Mr. Lewis's comments lead to, or question leads to the comment that I wanted to make to support the remarks that Chris Westerberg just made to you. Our concern, and in particular the concern at 1516 Hinman, we're the building that is immediately adjacent to the proposed hotel structure. And I want to say, first of all, that I really appreciate the efforts that Tom Blunk and his associates have made to accommodate the kind of concerns that our residents would inevitably have. Those people in our building who are at the rear of the building, they're obviously going to lose a lot of the open view that they had. I realize that view is not a primary concern for the city, but it, needless to say, is a concern for our residents. However, the Janko Associates anticipated that and designed a building that preserves some sight lines for our people, and we really appreciate that effort. We also are glad of the kind of building that Janko Associates plans to put in this space, because we think this extended stay hotel is a great idea for our neighborhood and including for our residents in our building. However, as you look down this alley, you see that at this end of the alley, these are older buildings that went in, obviously, prior to the time that the current zoning restrictions were in place. And consequently, the building to the west, the left side, is built within just a couple of feet of the property line. That property line you can see is where the concrete meets the asphalt. And similarly, on the right-hand side, the 1500 Hinman Building garage is just set back a couple of feet from the property line. And if you wanted to go to the next picture, Mr. Latinovich, you'd see that this is a view now from the north looking south down the alley. And on the right-hand side, that commercial building also is set back only a few feet from the property line. The 500 Davis Street building on the left is set back some 10 to 12 feet as to the actual structure, but you see that they also built up right along the property line. And the point of my comment in this regard is that at both ends of this alley, there is a very narrow passageway, the consequence of which is that when the many vehicles that travel up and down this alley come through this space, and so many of those vehicles being trucks, including up to semi-trailer size, but a number of refuse haulers and moving trucks because of all of the residents in the neighborhood, and smaller delivery vans. When they come down this alley, the one place in this stretch of alley where they can maneuver around one another is right in the middle of the alley. That is right where 1516 sits. Now, you saw a picture earlier, and Mr. Latinovich, if you went down to maybe the third, well, this is a good picture right here. That's the 1516 Hinman building on the left, and you see how it is set back some 15 feet, which is the current code requirement, and you see how the cars park, they pull in underneath the building so that there's quite a bit of space between the back ends of the cars and the property line, which is right where you can see the line between the asphalt of the alley and the surface of our rear parking deck. This is the area where the trucks like to park. And they stop here because this is the widest space they find in this alleyway. And the consequence is that if the 1515 proposal is approved as it now is made to you, the only maneuvering space there's going to be to get past one another in this alley, or if a truck has come down and stopped, which they often do to carry on their deliveries, and I'm talking about trucks also that service the 500 Davis building, they will stop in front of our building to make their deliveries into the 500 Davis building. Well, when those trucks are stopped there, the only place that you can possibly hope to maneuver is right here in this space. However, if the 1515 proposal goes through as planned, their building supports will run right up to the edge of the property. Now, Mr. Lewis asked the question. Mr. Latinovich answered that the D4 zoning requirement does not require any setback for the structure itself. I recognize that that's the case. The statement in the zoning requirement is that there is, quote, no requirement. There is, however, in that same zoning provision, a statement that says to the effect, the structure should be reflective of established uses and should provide suitable transition between a downtown district and those districts adjacent to downtown. Well, you saw that map earlier that Mr. Latinovich had. The 1515 property is in a D4 zone. The properties right across the alley are in a completely different kind of zone. And I urge you to consider whether it isn't a reasonable request that the 1515 hotel, instead of running its building supports right up to the edge of the alley, move them back a certain amount to create just a little more maneuvering space in this center part of the alley. I don't know how far advanced the plans are yet for the hotel, but as you look at the floor plan, it seems that they could find some way to compress the east-west axis of that building and pick up a few more feet that they could use to shorten the length of that building. Each of the buildings at the ends of the property have roughly 2.5 feet that they've given up. If the hotel could do something along those lines, it would make the problem of congestion in this alley so much less of a concern. Thank you. If you have any questions.
I have a question. And it's just, I just want to understand something. There's been a photo shown of a truck in the alley, and you had mentioned a truck in the alley. I just want to understand, when a truck is in the alley, what happens now with the vehicles either trying to get out or other vehicles trying to navigate the alley? I'd like to just know how's that handled?
Well, in fact, one of the residents of our building was just talking a moment ago about experiences that she has had in the past. She parks right on that alley, and there are times when she has asked those people, those trucks, to move slightly so she could get out of her space. Typically, you can imagine just from looking at this that if there is a truck planted in the middle of the alley, there's really no room for a vehicle to pull out. And this parking is such that these vehicles that in our building that are parked up against the back of the building can only get out of their parking spaces by coming out onto the alley and going to either Grove or Davis to get out. If a truck is parked there, we have to hope that they will accommodate us by moving just long enough for one of our vehicles to get out. If they won't accommodate us, and that was the occasion of the anecdote that that my neighbor was talking about, then we're at the mercy of that driver until he decides to pull out and move down the road. I'd say that some drivers are more accommodating than others in that regard. But equally important, not only are our vehicles potentially blocked in here, but because of the heavy traffic that this alley gets, Alderman Fisk said that it is really more of a street than an alley, and that's certainly the case. There's a tremendous amount of vehicle and pedestrian traffic all day long up and down this alley, so that when larger vehicles are stopped there, as I say, there's not much room to maneuver. Mr. Blunk mentioned that they parked 40 cars on the lot at the Highland Heil building. They did have a number of cars parked there. I never counted, but they did not park right up to the property line. They were set back. There was a period of time when after the property ceased being used, when that parking space was, I don't know if it was leased, but at any rate, the Davis Street Fish Market was parking cars there, and they tended to pull their cars more up to the edge of the alley. Subsequently, some of the commercial properties along Davis Street were parking vehicles over there somewhat carelessly that caused problems with traffic up and down the alley. We had to call the city and have them force these people to comply with not parking long vans that hung halfway out into the alley.
So then, for the other situation when there is no delivery truck or van that's just stopped in the alley, and I'm going to assume that that's probably illegal to do that, to just park and leave a truck there to do deliveries. I'm operating under that assumption unless I'm told otherwise. But the other situation where the alley is open and can be traversed north-south, is, as it stands now, is there enough room for 2 cars to go through?
Theoretically, it's a 20-foot alley. Vehicles tend to be, in width, something under 7 feet. So you ought to be able to pass by. If you don't want to risk your mirrors, you might. But again, if you put the hotel foundation posts right up on the property line, it reduces the maneuvering options considerably. Not to mention what might happen if there were vehicles parked there. Mr. Blunk has pointed out that they would urge their guests who have larger vehicles like SUVs not to use those alley spaces, and that might be a help. But the spaces themselves in those plans suggest that they're not really deep enough to accommodate a larger vehicle like an SUV, so that such a vehicle would stick out into the alley.
And then my last question is, you indicated that the alley is used as, like a street.
Well, I say that because as you see, there are residential buildings all down the alley. On the right-hand side, that's the 525 Grove building. That's Ms. Westerberg's building. And those cars come out. You can see they park underneath the building there. They come out onto the alley, and I suppose it depends where they're heading for. They could go out onto Grove, but they might want to come up to Davis, and for that matter, when they're going into park in their building, they may come down from Davis. So they travel that length. The building right next to us, 1508, which is Mike Taft's building, who just spoke to you, those people, they have underground parking for many of their residents, but there are some vehicles that park on the back, and those people would be coming up and down the alley. And then, of course, our residents here, they come up and down the alley, and incidentally, we have there are 40-some parking spaces underneath this overhang part of the building. Many of those people come out onto the alley. They can, by some backing and whatnot, they can work their way out to an exit that goes out onto Hinman, but most of them come out onto the alley instead. And then you see this yellow bumper, whatever you call it. That is the entrance to one of the two garages for the 500 Davis building. They have an underground parking garage. That's what this entrance is for. And so there's all kinds of vehicle traffic coming in and out of there. So all of that is happening on this alleyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Just have one small question. Have you measured the depth of the parking spaces on the alley that are right there?
I should have paced that off. The building is set back 15 feet. The parking spaces are, as you see, somewhat inside of that, so that the depth of the space is probably from the property line is probably 20 feet, 18 feet, let's call it.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a standard parking stall depth. Yeah, 19 feet, 7. Yeah. Is it?
20. That's a good 20.
Okay.
If the building is set back 15.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know whether they're actually larger than normal spots or regular spots.
I haven't made a comparison in that regard. This building was built in the 60s, so I don't know what the philosophy was back then, but it seems to me that they deliberately made these spaces deeper than the other parking spaces that are, say, underneath that overhang.
Okay. Thank you.
This is a question for staff. Mr. Viggs made a representation as to the setback requirements for buildings at the 1516 Hinman location. What is the setback required for buildings at that location?
The property zone R6, so for buildings, that would be the rear setback, and that's 25 feet.
Is it zoned R6 or D2?
The properties in the rear are zoned R6.
I have no idea what the zoning requirements were at the time
In the
our
60s,
building
correct.
went up.
It would have been probably something different.
I would just note that the D4 zoning requirement says that the residential buildings should be set back 15 feet, which is approximately what ours are. Now, I have no idea what the zoning was back in 1962, but at any rate, it's evident that the buildings that have gone up in the 60s and later all tried to accommodate one another with setbacks. 1516, 1508, 500 Davis all have these provisions.
Thank you. Any other questions for this witness? Thank you, Mr. Higgs. Ms. Hayfield.
I'm Elizabeth Hayford. I live at 1508 Hinman Avenue behind the proposed development. I don't really have anything to add to the comments of my neighbors. I think, we're all concerned about the alley and passage through the alley by automobiles and pedestrians, and we're all concerned with the amount of open air and green in that area, which is behind our building and behind the proposed residential hotel. And like others, I appreciate the efforts of the developers to try and accommodate a comfortable area for the residents of their hotel and for the neighbors. But I think there's still more work to be done.
Looks like it's AE of 1509 Hinman.
Hi, my name is Sandeep Gai. I'm the owner and operator of Vinnick Wine Company at 1509 Hinman. I don't own the building, but do rent there. Thank you, Chairman Peters and the rest of the board for listening to my comments. So I know we are very much looking forward to having a neighbor. It's been a while, and Tom has been very forthcoming and came into our business as well as some of our neighbors to sort of at least reach out an olive branch. And I know that they have had meetings with the local neighbors as well. So they've been very accommodating, but I have to make sure that we're protecting our interests as well as our customers. Our concerns are actually not of the building itself. I think it looks really pretty, and as far as the alleyway is concerned, I do have a suggestion, but I don't know whose jurisdiction that would fall under. But our concern is more during building, so I'm not sure what the safety suggestions were from the residents, but one of our concerns is definitely the vibration monitoring during the drilling of the foundation. We have extensive cellar in our basement that has, besides being nice and cool and dry, it needs to be vibration free. I know that's probably impossible, but what we'd like to do is minimize the vibrations if at all possible, and I don't know whose jurisdiction or concern that would fall under. And continuing on, I'd talk to a couple of the neighboring businesses as well. One of our other concerns is definitely accessibility during construction. I might fall on the opposite side of the aisle on this as far as our neighbors are concerned, but we'd actually like to see the cranes maybe function in the back on their own lot during construction. We've had to deal with the Davis as well as Chicago Avenue construction, as well as the tear down of the building previously, and have had inconveniences as far as sidewalk shutdowns as well as parking spot obstructions during that time. So we would like to see at least our sidewalk maintained. A lot of our business comes through that sidewalk, just walking business, as well as, a lot of our business does need cars for people to pick up their wine and drive it away, and so we'd like to see a lot of those parking spots maintained, not the ones that they're taking for the valet or people driving up, but ones perhaps during construction. I know that a lot of times the utility trucks can take up a lot of spots when they're putting on water mains as well as electricity. And finally, I wanted to talk about the alleyway. I don't know about the setback or any of that concern, but one of my suggestions, and I don't know who would officially decide this, is to make the alleyway one ways, so that I know a lot of the concerns are about driving around each other, but if everybody was going in the same direction, this would be a less of a problem. Yeah, that's my concerns.
Any questions? Hearing no questions, Ms. Lindwall.
Good evening. My name is Jean Lindwall. I live at 625 Library Place, which is not in the immediate block of the proposed development. I'm an urban planner by training with 35 plus years of experience in planning and zoning. And I've been asked by one of the neighbors to come and just talk for a few minutes about the importance of setbacks in Evanston. I happen to live on a 20-foot alley right by Northwestern. It's predominantly residential, and in that case, the garages are all required to be set back 5 feet, which is for most residential areas this part of the setback is used essentially for the garage aprons. And, in a busy alley, and mine is one of them with lots of university traffic, the setback really does help facilitate vehicles getting around each other. And in this particular case, I think it's very important with a busy alley where you have cars that are going to be backing out of the spaces into the alley to have that extra bit of buffer. And I too would be a bit concerned about having the building support columns right up against the alley. Given the garbage trucks and all of the other vehicles that are there, I mean, I would be a little concerned about a vehicle at some point hitting the building foundation, which would not be real good for the building. There have been, and then also, while you have longer vehicles, and if you can get them to park in someplace, the other available spots, but drivers don't always pull all the way into the stall. So I think that without that buffer, the 5-foot buffer, you also run the risk of having a driver parking a bit carelessly and overhanging the alley, even with a normal sized smaller car. There have been over the years many examples of buildings elsewhere in Evanston where the developer has asked to build the building and right up to the property lines. I think the theater project, or the replacement of the theater on Central Street with new multifamily residential development, where even there the building is, the parking supports are set back at least a few feet, and that's a much smaller alley. It's about a 16-foot alley, I believe. And that, again, that buffer is really, really important. Examples of projects that have been approved really without any kind of buffer is there's a townhouse development on Harrison, right by just behind the Central Street Business District, which I have no idea how those drivers get in and out of their garages, because that again is a very narrow alley. So I would encourage you to really be sensitive to the need to respect the alley setbacks, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions of this witness? Ms. Turk, or Mr. Turk.
My name is Eugene Turek. I live at 525 Grove. And I'd just like to add to what Krista said about the parking. When I look out my window, I see a minimum of 60 cars parked downstairs in and around those buildings, plus another 10 cars that are parked for the stores that are on Davis Street. Now, it seems to me everything is pointing to the fact that the incoming trucks and the outgoing trucks and everything is going to come through Davis Street, including the big garbage trucks that we have. They cannot get out of our area through going to Grove Street because they couldn't make a turn on the radius there. So everything heads up north. But now that Davis Street, because of the 5-foot bicycle path that the city put up, it's a very tight two-lane street, parking on both sides of the street. And I don't see how in the world a truck could get around those cars that are parked to close to the entrance of the alley. FedEx which has many deliveries. They used to park on Davis Street, double park. Now they can't do it, so FedEx and UPS, everybody goes into the alley to make their deliveries. The city gave North Shore permission to put up an 8-story adjacent building to what they have right now. As we were told, I understand the construction is supposed to start sometime this summer. It seems to be, it's inconceivable that we'd have an 8-story building at North Shore and right across the street, another 8-story building. And Lord only knows what would happen to the traffic and that congestion for a year and a half. Everything coming in and out of Davis Street. You have that one little alley that goes east and west from Chicago, but that's one way only going east, and that's a very narrow 16, 15-foot alleyway. So, as I said, I can't believe that the city will allow 2 huge construction buildings going up at the same time. One question I'd like to ask the developer is, how many spaces do you have for handicap parking? This has never been mentioned.
Two per code, I believe.
Are they shown on the map as handicap
Yes.
parking?
Yes.
I would imagine, since you don't have valet parking, you might by law required to have more than just 2. Could that be looked into?
We comply with code.
The 2 parking spaces for handicap that are proposed do meet the code.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Schermerhorn.
Hi, my name is Bill Schermerhorn. I work for Schermerhorn and Company. We manage the building at 531 Grove, and it's also got the Chicago Avenue address for all the commercial. It's along the first floor. We are the only property, I think, that really adjacents this property. And we are definitely for this project. I think that some of the comments that have been made, I think I take a bigger picture to this whole thing. We manage a ton of property. We travel a lot of alleys. We see a lot of different buildings. And it seems to me that the group has tried very hard to accommodate the neighbors. Some of the comments have been made about the existing pictures that we've seen. This one right up here, in my opinion, shows the parking just off the alley. So they're saying that it's okay for them to have a parking adjacent to the alley, but not the property that we're talking about, and it's been that way forever. When Highland Isle parked there, I can tell you they parked right up to the alley, and it was double deep. Some of the times they would go, it'd be almost 4 deep. They would just pack them in. You know, the alleys that I drive down, we have trucks that stop all the time. You got to be neighborly, and you got to sometimes move, or you got to wait. You know, these things happen. The comment that we're going to have 2 things under construction at the same time, God bless us all, because I think that we should have the economy booming, and we should look at the big picture. If we have a year and a half of inconvenience, it's better for the group. It's better for the long-term picture of this city. I really believe that development is a good thing. I also want to make a comment about, they're saying that some of these buildings are a foot off the property line, the existing ones. I'm not a surveyor, but I can bet you, or in my opinion, they're closer to being on that property line, if not right on it. Also, the tree, I can tell you that tree, I've seen the survey. It's right down the middle. It's not on the side. It's the lot line, I believe, is right down the middle. And I think that the proposal to take care of that tree, which in my opinion is under a great deal of stress from the demo, is not going to survive. I think that if you get what they're proposing to do, a tree at the end, that is a big caliber tree, that's a specimen tree that has a beautiful canopy to it, is going to be better in the long run. I don't think that tree, especially if they have to put a big detention area down there, I don't think the root system can handle it. So, you know, I just think the big picture, it's going to be great for the tax base. I think it's going to be great for the neighbors to have If they have relatives come and stay, there's going to be a place to stay. We don't have a hotel that has this extended stay. The college is going to benefit from it. I think that there's a ton of upside, and I know that there's always disruption, and I hope that is minimized. And I think the safety is a clear issue, but I think that we're dealing with professionals that are going to be safe because it's going to hit their bottom line if they're not. We don't want anybody hurt, and I think they're going to be very professional, and I think they're going to handle the pedestrian. I think this is a company that has done big projects in the past, and I think they can handle it, and I look forward to it going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Hughes.
Good evening. My name is Gregory Hughes from 2737 Central Street. It is my opinion that this development they're proposing is a first-class development. I think it would be a benefit for the city of Evanston. And just want to give you a little information. I worked at Heil Smart and Goli for 15 years. I was one of the ones that parked right up against that alley. We had about 40 cars that parked there. And there's about 12 cars that abutted the alley that was right up to the lot line. And we never had an issue, but I was there for 15 years and pulled in and out of that alley all the time. I think one of the items that they brought up was the green roof. And like Bill mentioned, Skirmerhorn manages the building next door. I think the green roof would be a huge benefit. Thank you.
Any questions? Is there anyone else other than the applicant who wishes to address the board at this time? The applicant now has an opportunity to address the board.
Mr. Chairman, again for the record, Greg Rains. We don't have any specific comments or responses right now. We'd be happy to first entertain any questions or follow-up that the board has in response to anything that has been brought up this evening. And again, our full team is here and available to answer any questions that came up or any questions that you have.
Board members, do you have any questions of the applicant?
Are there any accommodations for the vibration monitoring while during construction?
Sure. A number of the topics that were brought up we have addressed, and there'll be a construction management plan. They'll be documented prior to the building permit being issued, and part of that plan will be to have foundation surveys done so that any buildings that might be affected, that can be tracked. And so clearly the Shema that abuts our property is the one of immediate concern, but we'll look at all the surrounding neighborhoods with the structural engineer and with our contractor to determine what foundation surveys need to be done, what exterior surveys of sorts, cameras, what have you, so that we make sure that we're not affecting anybody's buildings. The piers that we're going to put in, we have to go 75 feet or so in through the sound. Those are drilled piers, so they're not the hammered sort of version that a lot of people think about. I am sensitive to Vinnick and their wine cellar next door, and so we're going to have to work with them to make sure that even the drilled piers, that as we get closer to that building, don't affect them in any sort of negative fashion.
Other than the requests that have been specifically made, is it your intention that the project would comply with other ordinances?
Yeah. Yes.
Is there anything else you wish to bring to the attention of the board?
Yeah, while I'm up here, I would say, I think everybody has had some very thoughtful comments. We've heard them before. We did look at a number of things with city staff to try and solve some of those things. Not everything's solvable. We know that change is sometimes hard. I would point out that the code would allow, from an FAR density perspective, project that is far more dense, and so when we approached this project initially, we tried very hard to stay within that envelope. I think we're doing about 78% of the allowable FAR in terms of building and massing area on that site, and so again, we think it's a relatively light use overall. Appreciate your time.
Board members, if there's nothing else from the developer, we're going to close the record. Do you have anything else? Board members, how do you wish to proceed? I think perhaps a short discussion and then people provide some indication of what they see as the issues or non-issues. We'll either then vote or address the standards. The floor is open to the board. The board is very quiet. I should ask, do you need a break?
No.
Okay.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Ford.
First of all, I want to say to the architect, this could have been really bad. And I think you have done a marvelous job. First, in terms of the way you've cited this on the property. I think this orientation east-west so that the north and south sides are closer to the ground was really smart. Part of the reason that earlier on I wanted to look at the plan of one of the residential floors was to be sure that what I was seeing was the set in along the north and south walls, which makes those much more attractive than they would have been without that shaping. So I think and looking at the two images, the before and after of the corner and the top hat, I think you've done a wonderful job. Just a couple of observations on the problems that the neighbors have raised. I'm not sure. Yeah, I like the elm tree too. It looks to me as though, given its location and what I suspect is the size of its root structure, that preserving that tree and doing the building is going to be very difficult. But I think you really do have to put something in, replace it, and I think I saw a reference here to a tree with a 9-inch caliper going back on that corner. I think that would be an absolute minimum. The tree has got to be well replaced, not just replaced, but well replaced. As far as the parking and the setbacks, my only thought, I mean, it's interesting, here we're confronted with a project that is providing parking spaces as required by the code. Some of you will recall that a couple of weeks ago we went through a rather intense discussion on a building which didn't. I'd almost be tempted to give away some parking spaces if that made sense in terms of the use of the property, if we could gain some setback on the alley. Now, I don't know what that configuration would look like, but if there was a way of gaining a couple of feet on the alley by reducing the number of parking spaces from, I don't know what, 34 to 32, maybe 30, that, from my standpoint, that might make some sense. But by and large, Mr. Chairman, I'd say I think this project makes sense in this location. Thank you.
Please, Mr. Galloway.
First off, I'd like to say that this is an excellent use, in my opinion, of this site, that it provides a relatively low-impact project with a high amount of benefits. And I can't think of a better use for this site. I think it will give us the fewest amount of vehicular and traffic impact and the maximum amount of street pedestrian activity, and create a captive market for local retail as well, and add a very unique functioning building in the entire North Shore. I also agree that the architect has done a splendid job, in my opinion, in the design of this building. I echo Mr. Ford's comments in regards to the massing, the east-west orientation, which both provides the hotel rooms with light, vent, and views, as well as does as little as possible to take away any of those views, light, and vent from existing buildings. And I echo his comments about the articulation of all the facades, some more subtle than others, but nevertheless, a slight articulation or a slight reveal or a shadow line or a change in material in a building in this location adds a sense of detail and is, in my opinion, achieves a great benefit for little expense. As far as the first floor plan is concerned, I think it's splendid. I think moving all the public functions to the front of the street, opening the windows of the restaurant area to the walkways outside, and locating all your service facilities at the rear and parking at the rear, I think is all both highly logical, very efficient, and extremely beneficial as regards the way the building addresses the street. The tall first floor windows and the use of a stone base and masonry above, I think, is very respectful of the adjacent buildings. If we can pull up the front facade or the west facade, the west elevation. I have one area that causes me a little, maybe even concern is too strong a word, and it deals with the east. There we go. The southernmost two-story portion is capped with a stone coping, which then, as I understand it, extends across the 8-story portion and then terminates where the masonry ends and the metal panel begins. And then, if I understand this correctly, the plane of the brick on the 2-story portion and the portion to the north or left, as we're looking here, is the same. So I'm just a little personally uncomfortable with that stone coping going across at that point. Everything else here seems to say, okay, I'm the vertical element and I'm a wing, and it falls into place. It's a minor observation, but I wanted to point that out. We've seen some of the materials that you brought this evening. By far, my first preference for the brick would be the one that's the first one in the one furthest in the left in the binder, which has a variegated color and some minor iron spot to it. I think that would afford the greatest amount of variety to the facade, particularly given that we're using a larger scale masonry brick, a utility brick, and there won't be as many mortar lines to add a subtle sense of detail. By variegating the color slightly from one brick to another, I think will be of great benefit, and can also play in the use of similar sensitive colors that would be used both for the metal panel and for the window frames. And as regards the metal panel, I am very pleased at what's happening on these colored elevations. I am very concerned that when the metal panel is actually employed on the building, that it's going to be too stark, too reflective, maybe even glaring. So if I had my druthers, whatever occurs there would have the color and finish or patina of, say, lead or turn-coated stainless, something that has a very low reflectivity and is closer to the color on your renderings here than the two samples that I've seen. As regards the setbacks, you know, part of urban living, one could say, is the enjoyment of having to engage in conversation and interact with people who initially are an encumbrance to you, but upon engaging them, you realize, you know, we're in this all together and we can work this out. And I've just had a positive interaction with this service delivery man who has apologized and says that he will get back in his truck and move it just so that I can get out of my parking space. And there are so many communities and suburbs that are replete with urban sprawl, roadways that are wide enough to accommodate massive troop movements should we choose to evacuate an entire coast to another coast. So I do not mind riding my bicycle, driving my car, or motorcycle down alleyways and having to maybe negotiate that passage with other citizens. And in addition, if you look at the rear of the property, there are really only 6 parked automobiles that hold the potential to protrude into a 5-foot setback. And I contend that given the testimony of the gentleman from Highland Heil, that A, we don't have a problem that really needs to be solved, or we don't have a situation that we haven't addressed in the past. But furthermore, if that proves to be the case, a number of those parking spots can be encouraged to move forward. The cars can be encouraged. We can move the bumpers and put signs up there that say, please pull forward to, you know, contact the contact bumper so that the tail end of the car is as far away from the alley as possible. Or we could declare some of them compact car spaces only. But in short, I don't believe it's a problem that needs to be solved, certainly at the extent of such an accommodating project. And then there's the tree. I'm very fond of elm trees. I had one at my parents' home where we grew up, and I think the location of this tree and the size of it is, from an aesthetic standpoint and from given what's occurring here now, would be delightful. It would be splendid. But I defer to a landscape architect or an arborist to tell me that he can, you know, virtually guarantee that whatever accommodations the developer makes that are reasonable to make sure that this thing survives the construction, that it will continue to thrive for a significant period of time thereafter. So while the romantic part of me would like to see that there, and I would encourage maybe further investigation as to options or determination of the viability of its survival given certain procedures, I would not be disturbed if the tree was removed and money was spent to provide additional landscaping amenities, which we are more assured will survive over the long term. I think that concludes my comments.
Other comments, please.
Well, I think it's a fabulous idea. It's a terrific, project to bring to downtown Evanston. I think that site is an armpit right now for Evanston, and thank you very much for coming up with this terrific idea. I love the site plan. I love the way the tower takes up such little space on the property. I think it has the potential to bring more consumers to Evanston, which heavens knows we need. I also am thrilled with the amount of tax revenue that's coming in. Even if the hotel is empty, we're still going to get $337,000 a year in taxes. Gotta love that. And it meets a need, obviously, for the area. If you're telling me the North Shore has only one facility like this, I mean, this is a terrific idea. I'm not as concerned about the full-service restaurant as the staff has proposed. I don't think Evanston needs another full-service restaurant. I think having a place where you can get a sandwich and a salad and a drink is a terrific idea. I think staff is recommending that the east-west alley be one way. Is that correct on this project?
That is correct. The alley actually is 16 feet wide, and there are signs that are placed to make it a one-way alley. Unfortunately, in the few times that I visited the site, I have witnessed some drivers going the opposite direction. So, in essence, it currently does not function as a one-way alley. We have recommended additional traffic signage be installed to hopefully discourage drivers to drive westbound.
Is there any enforcement that can be undertaken to keep trucks from clogging up this alley?
I've talked to our other city staff that administers parking enforcement both on city streets and public alleys, and the first response was that's what the 311 is for. The residents should call if there is a vehicle blocking an alley that is not doing active loading or unloading. That vehicle should be reported to the city, and the city would go out there and enforce. However, oftentimes it's difficult to prove that somebody's not doing active loading or unloading unless the
Right,
driver
and
is
it's a low
gone.
priority, too, for enforcement.
So that's the way it would be enforced.
Other comments?
I'm sensitive to everyone's concerns about the setbacks. I, too, live in an area where it's very difficult to make a turn into my driving facility, but I think this is a great use of the site, and I'm willing to make that exception. I think the elm tree is a beautiful tree. It's right in the middle of that block. It's like the only tree in that area. I can't imagine how it would survive with the construction going on, even though the arborist has recommended taking several steps. I think the money would be better spent to invest in a decent-sized tree on somewhere else on the property or somewhere else in Evanston.
Go ahead.
Press that button. Okay, I also want to say that I think that it's a fantastic project, that it's ideal for downtown Evanston. It'll bring after-hours activity to these other restaurants, which is a good thing. I agree also that I don't think a restaurant we need another restaurant. We can stumble on 50 restaurants within 2 blocks of this facility. I think it was commented that it's maybe becomes a little desert connection. I think it's actually a source of pedestrian traffic, not a barrier to pedestrian traffic. I think it's very sensitively masked with the way it adjoins the adjacent buildings, and that's done very well. I share the concern with about construction safety and the imposition that these things do with the surrounding community. So I would hope that there is a good plan worked out, and concern for the Vinnick wine, which I like to go and buy wine from this man, so keep his wine nice. No. I think the tree issue can be worked out in many ways, and I'm surprised no one said that they're willing to just sacrifice a parking space to allow this tree to sit within without making a complete 5-foot setback that you could lose a spot or two or a compact spot. And I'm not convinced that the stormwater detention, the underground stormwater detention, can only be where it is. It might be able to be moved back, but that said, I'm not convinced that the tree would survive the survive the construction. So I would really like to, I guess, hear an opinion, see that there would be an opinion from some horticulturalist or landscape architect. And that said, I think it's a fantastic project with just a few things that can be worked out in the end. So.
Lonnie?
I agree with basically the comments that have been made and articulated so far. I do support the request, and I'm mindful because the last two matters that we had, and everyone stands on its own. This is a vacant site, just as the previous application was, and when we make our recommendations, someone's going to be happy and someone's going to be disappointed. And I can hear the audibles from the people who live in the neighborhood and have expressed their positions based on their observations and based on facts. I think I can certainly speak for the panel. We all take that into consideration. I think that given the location of this particular site being in downtown Evanston in a densely populated area, I think that the setback request within a range or degree is not overly broad. That's my opinion. And I'm sure that everyone who spoke from the community in the neighborhood who disagrees with that, I respect your position on it. I understand where you're coming from. But from my perspective, I think given the location, given it's a downtown area, I've seen firsthand the product that this particular developer has done. In particular, they apparently redeveloped. I didn't realize it was a redevelopment of the Marriott in Naperville. I was there in December, and I was particularly impressed. I'd driven by it a few times before, and I thought it was a very nice property. The area is not comparable or similar to downtown Evanston. It's the suburbs. But it was a good product. What I also think it's important is that we have a developer who happens to be a resident of Evanston. So I think inherent in this particular project, if I'm going to do work in my own, I think all of us are professional enough, whether or not, no matter what we do, we should be mindful and respectful of whoever we're working with or wherever we're working. But I have to think that a developer who is actually a resident of Evanston is going to be particularly mindful of the success of this project from before they came in here until it's done. And I, based on what I've seen and what I've read, I think that would be the case. And I think that over time, I think that it's going to be an outstanding addition to downtown Evanston, and I certainly hope that the residents and the neighbors come to enjoy it or use it, and that everybody benefits from it. So, thank you.
I have heard most of the board members suggest that they don't believe the condition about the commercial restaurant space is appropriate. And so I would propose that we not include that condition. I have heard some other suggestions. One of them is compliance with all other applicable ordinances, which I think needs to be specified. Another is that oversized parking should not be permitted in the parking stalls which have access through the alley. I think there needs to be a snow plan for snow removal acceptable to the city council or their designee. They may well decide to designate this to the city traffic engineers or maybe even zoning and planning. I also think we do not have evidence with respect to the viability of the elm tree after construction. And I would propose a condition as part of the recommendation that the city, we would recommend to the city council approval subject to a condition that the elm tree be maintained if the council believes it's appropriate, with up to a reduction of up to 3 parking spaces if they believe that's appropriate, or in the alternative, after they have received evidence about the viability of the tree and the need for parking, that there be a replacement tree with a minimum of a 9-inch caliper. Although if Mr. Ford thinks it should be slightly larger than that, that might be appropriate too. So that I'm proposing a positive recommendation, but with essentially the question of the tree not resolved, and the council receiving a recommendation that they do the necessary research and decide on maintaining the tree and losing some parking, or providing for a replacement tree of a specific size. Gentlemen.
Chairman, I just want to address one more thing. The neighbors talked about permeable paving as an issue, and which is, I think a very interesting idea, and I would like to hear what other people think about
I would agree that is an appropriate condition.
Yeah, it seems like yeah.
What do the other board members feel about that?
Do we know what the cost is compared to regular asphalt?
I don't have that number, but
we had testimony that the short-term cost is higher and the long-term cost is not.
So what would the payback be then?
So there is a premium. I don't know what it is, but it is a premium. And there is a question about, we've looked into this on other projects, and there is a question about longevity. Does it really last long? I talked to Mike beforehand. He's got firsthand experience. He says it does last a long period of time. So it's not that we're not open to looking into that, but I would make the point that that doesn't replace the city requirement to have the storm basin. So what he was referring to was in addition to that, and what you have to remember is that southeast corner, the part that's not covered by building, most of that underground is covered by the actual detention basin. So you'd be dropping water on top of the detention basin that has to move around it. I'm not sure if it really gets a lot of benefit on this small and
Right,
tight of a
that's
site.
I made my suggestion, the alternative, because we don't have engineering about the detention basin.
I think Alderman has a comment.
Alderman? I think we better need a microphone.
Thank you, Judy Fisk, First Ward Alderman. I can tell you that we've installed the porous paving on Davis Street as part of the Davis Street reconstruction, and I've watched that very carefully. I have a business right on Davis Street. So the parking spaces that are on Davis throughout the snow and the rains, I've talked to staff about those, and they're working very well, and actually it's holding up very well. So again, in our continuing conversations, I think Mr. Taft had testified that in his experience as a professional, it required less maintenance in terms of the popping, the problems that we have right now that you can see everywhere in Evanston in terms of potholes. So I think ultimately the maintenance of the porous paving, if it does turn out to be what we expect and what we've seen on Davis Street, is actually going to be better and less expensive for the city in the long run.
Alderman, I hate to suggest dropping the tree problem in the laps of the alderman, but between now and planned the time P&D meets?
No, I think-
You'll have more information.
I think your suggestion about how to condition going forward is a good one. And I do think that looking at removing some parking spaces or being creative in terms of how to retain the tree is certainly worth it. Again, we're a tree city. We've been a tree city for a long time. We should make every effort that we can to retain the tree. If in talking to arborists, it can be retained, and that's my understanding, I believe, Mr. Munzer, is that talking to the city arborist, the tree seems to be in very good condition, and there's no reason to think that it wouldn't survive construction.
The only other comment I have is that I think this, I agree with Lenny, this is an urban setting. I think a zero setback line for the building is contemplated by the existing ordinances and the comprehensive plan and the downtown plan. I think the alley is 20-foot alley, which is larger than most of our alleys, but it functions as an alley. Which means there will be trucks, and there will be trucks that stop to unload, and there will be cars coming and going, and it seems to me appropriate at this location, though, as someone who has needs sometimes to access things along the alley, I know that there's sometimes waiting, inconvenience, but it's an alley. Other gentlemen? I've closed the record, so I can't take more argument.
Clarifications.
Okay.
Okay. One point on the conditions, we're happy to continue to discuss with the city to try to solve the tree issue, but as far as removing additional parking spaces, that's really not going to work for us, because from an operational standpoint, we really need about a third of the spaces to meet the code requirements. It doesn't work for us from a business standpoint. So we're happy to continue the dialogue. We've had a proposal that will replace a tree with at least a 9-inch caliper tree. We can continue to discuss that, and we would request that you can make the condition along those lines, but we really can't afford to lose any more spaces.
My suggestion defers that question.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. So as a clarification.
And you'll, I'm sure, be able to make that argument if my recommendation is adopted by the board. It's not a decision to go one way or another. It's a decision that drops this in the laps of the alderman.
Thank you.
I mean the council, right. Not one alderman. Yeah.
Let me be sure I understand. In your proposal, your preference ordering is the existing tree, a replacement tree on the southeast corner, which I understand would cost the compact parking space, which is no big deal because you've still got 34, and then third, cash payment into the tree fund or whatever. That's the preference ordering in your motion?
I didn't mention cash payment, and I don't have a preference ordering, but I'm suggesting that I provide two recommendations with the idea that the council and the staff and the developer will look at what's feasible. I don't know what's feasible.
If I was framing the motion, that would be by preference ordering.
You are welcome to make the motion. Let me ask if there are other comments from the board. Is there a motion? Mr. Ford?
I will move that we recommend the project to council with the conditions suggested by the chairman and with a expressed preference to keep the elm tree if it's feasible, to replace it with a significant tree as a next best, and as the developer has proposed, if that can't be worked out with the adjacent property owner, that the developer then make a contribution to the tree fund.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second?
Is there discussion of that motion? Could we have a roll call vote?
We have a motion to approve the proposal with the conditions in this. We have a motion to approve the proposal with the conditions in the staff report, except for the condition number 2, with other conditions as outlined by Chairman Peters. First one would be compliance with all applicable ordinances. Second one would be the oversized parking not be allowed in the 7 parking spaces that are accessed off of the alleys. That a snow plan be presented to the council. And the final one being that the preservation of the tree in the rear be worked out in the order of preference, that the tree should be saved, number 1. If not, the tree should be replaced in the southeast corner, or if that cannot be worked out, that a contribution be made to the Urban Reforestation Fund.
The only change I'd make is to save the tree if feasible.
Commissioner Fort.
Yes.
Commissioner Goddard.
Yes.
Commissioner Asaro.
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis.
Yes.
Chairman Peters.
Yes. We do need to address the standards. The first relevant standard is that the development be compatible with surrounding development and not be of such a nature of height, bulk, and scale as to exercise influence contrary to the intent of the zoning ordinance. I believe we meet that standard, given the provision in the ordinance of 0 setback and the fact that there is a 20-foot alley. And please say something if you disagree with these findings. Each planned development shall be compatible with and implement the adopted comprehensive general plan as amended and any adopted land use or urban design plan specific to the area, this zoning ordinance, and other pertinent city planning and development policies. I believe that we meet those with respect to the comprehensive plan. I think the representations in the packet provided by the developer are accurate and correct. I think that the proposal meets the requirements in the downtown plan as interpreted in the downtown ordinance with respect to land use, intensity, preservation isn't relevant, environment, traffic impact and parking, there is impact on schools, and I think it will not alter the character of the business district and surrounding residential neighborhoods. I believe it reflects business district planning and economic development goals contained in the downtown plan and in the comprehensive plan. And again, the comprehensive plan is relevant sections I referred to in the packet from the developer, and the downtown development goals include and building at this intensity at this location. I think the plan does conserve the taxable value of land and buildings in the city, and we have testimony as to the taxability of this land and the increase in taxability compared to having the land vacant. Each planned development shall enhance and maintain the pedestrian character of the business districts. I believe it does so with primarily from the 0 lot line along Chicago Avenue and the transparency of the first floor windows so that pedestrians can actually see what's going on and the walk would be more interesting. Each planned development shall enhance the streetscape and architectural character of the business districts. I believe Mr. Galloway's comments recognize that aspect of the requirements. We have two sections on requirements for when construction is going to start, and that we don't have to make a finding on. The conditions included compliance with all applicable ordinances, and there is a requirement that the proposal comply with the landscaping and screening ordinance, and we have incorporated that by requiring compliance with the other ordinances. I'm just running through these because some are redundant, and we don't want to address them twice. Sorry to take so long. I think we have addressed, or I have addressed, and if the commission agrees, we have addressed the relevant standards. I see a lot of head nodding. The record should show that all of the commissioners have nodded their heads in the affirmative. So that concludes the hearing. And the only matter that is left, if the commission wishes, is to discuss a style for the minutes. But if the commission would like to defer that and not handle that at this time, that would be okay too.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, one other matter. Mr. Friedman has been our representative to the economic development. His term is expiring on the 14th. This would have been his last meeting had he been here. I propose to nominate myself for that role, unless someone else really wants to do that.
For what role?
Representative.
Liaison with the economic development.
Oh. Second the motion?
Yeah.
If there's no objection, then that would be my suggestion. Is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor?
Aye.
The commission is adjourned.